Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scottish Police Authority's Standing Committee for People Matters. I'm Tom Halpin, and I've taken over the chair of the committee from Fiona McQueen, and pass on my note of gratitude to Fiona for the work that she did in leading this work. Should I drop off the call today, I would ask Alistair Hay to step in and chair the meeting until I get reconnected. A warm welcome to our colleagues representing trade unions, staff associations, and we also have HMICS representation on the call today. And of course, to any member of the public who join us, you're more than welcome. This is an important part of the transparency and the governance of policing in Scotland. As a reminder to all on the call, and for those watching for the first time, and for clarity in terms of when papers are presented, we'll take initial comments and questions from Scottish Police Authority board members before I then bring in the staff associations and union attendees to provide members with any wider perspective on the issue being discussed that they may wish to give. Members then will be able to ask further questions following these contributions or observations. Today, no members' apologies have been noted. Is there anything else I should note at this time? Okay, if we move on then in the agenda, just bear with me while I take control of my documents here. Can I ask under item 1.2, are there any declarations of interest or connections to the matters being discussed in this committee today? None. So it's noted. Can we then move to item 1.3, the public minute from the meeting that was held on the 27th of November, which is for approval. I can invite everyone to approve or comment otherwise. Okay, that minute is noted and approved. Item 1.4, the rolling action log and matters arising relating to the public session at the last committee. Invite you to agree the updates in the logs, which are noted as covered in today's business, with the exception of one item which has been standing for quite some time now, is deep dive around injured and duty, a very serious matter, and we're talking about bringing a paper to the May meeting in relation to that. Is everybody quite content to accept the updates in the action log? Okay, thank you. We now in item 1.5, in terms of our standing orders, is the decision of taking business in private in accordance with that order, section 20. I invite you to agree to taking agenda items 6 to 8 in the agenda today in private. Are you content to do that? Thank you. Okay, we then move on to the first item for broader presentation discussion, wellbeing and inclusion, is paper 2.1, and invite Katie Miller, our Director of People and Development, to present the paper and start the conversation.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. So this report provides a Q3 update. What I would call out is that we're working towards an August report, which will be your annual report. And we will be making that report a joint report between Dawn, Health and Safety, and Health and Wellbeing, so that we start to bring together the kind of holistic approach around some of our reporting. So note that August will be your main update from us. What I'd call out in the report in front of you today is just a general update in terms of the Health and Wellbeing Action Plan, which was approved at the People Committee in November 2024. So within that, you'll see a number of different areas where we are making progress against the approved action plan. What I would call out is perhaps a couple of areas of risk for us at the moment. One is in relation to a restructure of the People and Development team. So we've just concluded consultation on that and are moving into an implementation of a new People and Development structure and operating model. So a number of transformation work streams. and therefore balancing business as usual delivery whilst kind of moving forward with that redesign. The second part that I will call out is particularly in relation to reasonable adjustments and perhaps some of the delays that we're receiving in terms of access to work and just that whole end-to-end process at the moment. And some meetings which the team have been having with the Department of Work and Pension around some of the delays in that system, but actually the DWP pointing to future models where actually perhaps we will see less assistance in terms of some of the assessments and potentially less assistance in terms of financial assistance that we currently receive in relation to reasonable adjustments. So we've taken that away. That's now on our risk register as an organisation. But we do know that more broadly end-to-end, working with ACC Sutherland, for example, in neurodiversity space, we will need to do an end-to-end review of that to make sure that we're still progressing what we can. So apart from that, I will take the report as read and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Can I invite initial questions from board members, please? Katrina Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for that report. Very interested as well in the bits that you've pulled out of it. I've got a couple of questions to this report. I'm going to kind of focus in specifically on issues around trauma, and I guess what I'm wondering is, how confident are you that the system works, the processes for addressing individuals who've experienced trauma are effective for everyone? Because, I mean, as we know, people are not always going to be in a position to recognise that they're experiencing trauma. They're not always necessarily going to feel that they want to pursue that kind of route to support and help. So I guess I'm wondering about, even if they don't recognise or they feel unable to access the help, how confident are you there's still something in place to support those individuals?
Thank you. I'll respond, and then I actually ask my colleague ACC Sutherland to come in from an operational perspective as well. So I think you're spot on in terms of there's one thing about having your systems, processes, approaches, etc. in place, but it's another thing about colleagues feeling that they can either access it safely, etc. So we can see evidence points where a number of steps that we've taken are actually having a very positive supporting factor for colleagues. And that could be around looking at kind of high-risk roles, assaults on officers and staff, trim assessments, through to further provision that we've got under occupational health. So specialist counselling, where we can absolutely start to see some of the positive impact that is now having on colleagues. So I think across the range, there are different areas where we can point to evidence. I guess my ultimate question will always be, does it feel from a colleague perspective that they know what they're able to access, how they can access it, and that they feel safe and secure in doing that? I'm wondering if I'm able to bring in ACC Sutherland, who, as I say, might have some operational perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you, Katie, Chair. Thank you, Katrina. I think it's I really welcome this being raised. I think it's something that we have more to do, and more broadly from a policing perspective, the more that we can become trauma informed more broadly, the greater the greater our ability to look after our own people, and the greater our ability to service the communities that we serve on a day-to-day basis. So we continue through Policing Together, through our relationships with Public Health Scotland and others, to try and improve our overall approach to being trauma informed, and that's our kind of, I suppose, the strategic banner that sits over that. At that real operational level, our first kind of way to combat that and to support our officers support our officers are through TRIM referrals, so trauma risk incident management, and our officers who are going through traumatic experiences are offered that TRIM support before the end of shift, but then there's a follow-up with that as well. And part of the work that we've been doing recently is to make sure that we've got the right level, the right number of TRIM trained supervisors and officers who can provide that support, and we need to increase that number a bit as well. I think you then look more broadly, as you say, well, when does that that you might not suffer that trauma in the first instance, or you might not suffer it, but we have a range of other measures that we've been doing. For instance, an example was in the Maryhill area of Glasgow last year, we had one shift who unfortunately had to go to a number of very horrific suicides in a very short period of time. And on the back of that, we recognised the impact that was going to cause, and we arranged wellbeing weekends for these officers up through the police treatment centre. So these wellbeing weekends have proven to be really, really popular, and in the last 12 months, they've been offered out to our road policing colleagues who obviously have the unfortunate job of going to a number of road fatalities, etc. So it is an area that we're alive to. It is an area that we're continuing to grow and improve. The wellbeing fund has been built into the budget for next year and will support the continuation of these wellbeing weekends. So on one hand, we have that TRIM support and that internal focus. We've clearly got the employee assistance element through Optima and through those who go off with trauma-related stress and how we manage that absence. But we're also looking at other proactive measures such as these wellbeing weekends. So that's kind of where we are from the operational side.
And I find that really interesting, actually. Thank you. Can I just double check? Are you then evaluating, those things like those wellbeing weekends, and are you looking to roll them out throughout Scotland if they're being really successful?
Yes, there's a couple. So we evaluated the first one that was done on the back of that particular challenging period in Glasgow, and was found to be very, very valuable. So we know, the early feedback is that it works. What we're looking to do now, clearly there's a capacity element within the treatment centre. So there are only so many of these weekends available, and it's about then prioritising officers and staff into these weekends over the next 12 months as that budget comes online next year.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I've actually got quite a few questions, but I know we've got a limited amount of time. So, but no, that's really, really interesting. So, following on from this discussion, then, looking at ill health retired, what do we understand where the overlap is in terms of trauma? Post-traumatic stress disorder? Do we have any data on how many ill health retired are related to trauma? Are there any themes? Do we have a real understanding? So this is a general question rather than specifically to you, Mark. So just wondering if we've got a bit more information about ill health retired and its relationship with trauma, and are there any specific groups that are impacted?
Katie, my better coming to you with that question.
Yes. So I actually review every ill health retirement and every injury on duty. So I read every single one of them. And whilst we're obviously collating the report for the deep dive with members, what I would see is far more psychological kind of conditions, situations coming through. And that might be, as ACC Sutherland was saying, around role-related psychological impact. Some of it is physical impact that then leads to psychological impact. Some of it is actually matters inside of work, but matters outside of work. So, Katrina, it's quite hard to say that it's clear cut in terms of that categorization, because it tends to be quite holistic. Sure. But there is certainly a common theme coming round about I guess the role of policing and the impact that can have on individuals. Yes.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's a really important area, obviously. And like I said, could carry on this conversation for great length, but I'm aware of time. I actually did have another supplementary, Chair, if that's okay. Can you? Are you?
Yeah. Please.
So it was actually about your comments around the reasonable adjustments and your conversation around access to work. So it was really more. Firstly, I'm really pleased to see this kind of being brought into the conversation. I think it's obviously a big issue for a lot of people involved in Police Scotland, and also so And it was really just a comment, my own experience. It's quite interesting. So what you're saying is, I gather, is that there's going to be a reduction in the resources being put through access to work and available to organisations such as Police Scotland. So obviously that's not great in many ways, but my other comment would be just a general one, which is in itself access to work and that kind of intervention isn't necessarily always the be all and end all anyway, because what you're looking at is sort of organisational processes and policies and things that make it an inclusive place for everyone to work. And I've actually gone through access to work, and the process was so difficult that I couldn't access what they recommended. So I actually get, you know, so it's an interesting area. But thank you for raising it.
Thank you. Can I come to you, Alistair, now?
Yeah. Excuse me. I'll offer apologies first of all. I've had a cold, and if I keep coughing and sneezing, so luckily you're all remote, so I won't infect you. Just a quick follow-up on Katrina's questions, and then I'll come to my own question. You may have answered this, but just for clarity on TRIM, is TRIM an opt-in, or is it an opt-out? So if you're involved in something where TRIM's appropriate, do you have to opt in, or does Police Scotland automatically start putting you through the process and you can choose to opt out?
Yeah, probably. Katie, you happy for me just to cover that off?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's predominantly an opt-out. What I would say is it relies on a supervisor, you know, kind of recognising that an incident is likely to cause an officer trauma, but the officer or member of police staff will not have to come forward and say, I would like TRIM. The supervisors around and colleagues around that individual should recognise that they've been to a fatal road accident, a difficult crime scene, whatever it might be, and say, right, I'm going to now wrap that trauma support round that individual, and then that individual can continue with that support or say, no, I'm actually okay, thank you very much. So it is predominantly an opt-out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. And obviously a note in the paper, you know, that desire that health and well-being, we develop a workforce who prioritise well-being, and a key to that, as you've just said, is the line management within the organisation. And a note in the paper that on most of the development, I think all the development courses, health and well-being is now part of the syllabus, you know, going forward. So and that opt-in, opt-out, I'm sure it's something that you discuss and debate, and you'll find the best way forward on it. If I can move on to my question, and apologies for this as well, you know, I do chair Policing Performance Committee, so when I read this paper, there's no doubting the effort that is going in. There is a lot of actions that are taking place, and I know, Katie, there's going to be a fuller paper coming in August. You did say that. So there's a lot of actions, there's a lot of activity. So my first question would be around, you know, is there a coherence to all these actions and activities? So how would you navigate, you know, as a member, as a police officer or a member of police staff, how did you navigate these? And appreciate like management involvement in that, because it looks complex to me to find the right one. And the other one is about that desire to be, you know, an organisation that values health and well-being. And I know in Vision 2030, a thriving workforce is one of the things that is aimed for. So where we are, you know, how have you baselined it? How are these actions going to then deliver better outcomes? How are we going to know that they've delivered better outcomes? And how will you express, you know, the benefits of those, so that we can actually see that we have a thriving workforce, and we can see that you that we truly are an organisation that values well-being? A lot of questions in there. Apologies.
Thank you, Alistair. So in terms of baseline, there are two documents that we started with, two primary documents. One was the HMICS frontline wellbeing audit, And the second one, concurrently, we commissioned an independent expert in wellbeing to undertake an assessment of our wellbeing plan, etc. So those two pieces of evidence are really the start point from which we've then developed the action plan. I think Police Scotland, from my experience, are no different from other organisations in that one of the Achilles heels is putting too much into this space. And it's all done with very positive intent. However, what then happens is that, as you say, it becomes quite a muddled landscape. It becomes quite hard to evidence pieces. And therefore, actually, part of the grip that the team are perhaps challenged with at the moment is how just to stop the flow of asks coming in around can we. So there's a bit for me about action plan in the appendix and being very clear about actually what's proactive, strategic. We will still be talking about this in 2 to 3 years' time because of the nature of strategy and changing culture, etc. Which ones are preventative, and then which ones what we call undo. So in that moment in time when an officer or staff member experiences trauma, what is it that we do in that moment to help try and undo that particular piece? So to look at it through those lenses. I think that what I would reflect on the report is it is light on evidence. So, you know, even reading it myself, and in fact, one of my colleagues, John McLean, were talking about this morning, about despite all of this, or in spite of it, how do we know if it's made any difference to absence, whether that's short-term, long-term, psychological, etc. And I guess as we now do the committee reset for August and a new style of reporting and bringing in health and safety as well, what I would expect to see, I'm going to far less words and a lot more data, is kind of how I'm putting it to the team. So I think we have that baseline. The challenge now for us is between now and the August report is to be able to demonstrate to you on the data what the difference is that's being made. And as an organisation, as a committee, having the confidence to say, if we're doing something and we've invested in it, but it's not having that intended impact, then let's stop doing it. Let's make a considered choice to deprioritise it rather than keep it going.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and I appreciate that the focus, and it is a work in progress, and I look forward to August. What about my question, Katie, around it looks like quite a complex and cluttered landscape. So how do you help people to navigate their way through that at this moment in time? Line managers being part of that.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of busy landscape, I think, is as a result of the intent of trying to almost do too much at points. Part of the redesign of people in development is for us as a team, as an HR team, to be really clear that we are here to provide a service for customers, so for colleagues. And therefore, what are those points of entry into our kind of service proposition? So what we design. And I think one of the reflections that I have of our team is a lot of very good work, but perhaps sometimes we design it through a policy lens rather than what's the colleague experience lens, or we design it through a legislative response rather than, if you're a colleague, how do you navigate that? So as part of the P&D transformation, we are looking at everything from our big end-to-end processes, how many mailboxes we have, what's automated, what's workflowed. Do you send a message in and does it feel like it goes into a black hole? Do you have a named response? So we've got a programme of work that will be 6 to 12 months that will be around that whole redesign of the service of P&D and how you access that at different points. So I think it's probably reasonable for staff to know where to access some of our bigger pieces like OC Health, EAP, TRIM, Lifelines, Police Treatment Centre, etc. So some of the third party. But I still think that kind of landing content needs to be sharpened up for sure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Katie. And obviously we've got the staff survey, speaking about that later, and there's comments in there that I think that are valuable and are being picked up on. So appreciate that staff and their experience is key to it. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Thanks for those questions. At this stage, can I ask the Police Federation, have you any comments or points to highlight. Brian Jones.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Appreciate the invitation to speak on this matter. The previous chair of this group has raised a significant amount of concerns about this issue, along with previous members of the Force Executive, I think 2 or 3 years ago in Glasgow, and that got the conversation started. The biggest concern from ourselves is we have a smaller resource dealing with a greater number of traumatic incidents. And if I identify one area only, and I wouldn't be surprised that I talk about road policing, but if you see road policing resources has reduced by 1/3 in Police Scotland from its creation, and yet the number of fatalities we're dealing with has increased by 25% in the last year, that gives us a great concern that we have fewer number of officers dealing with greater numbers of trauma. But I appreciate the efforts of the organisation to try and look at these problems, and it is going to be a long journey to get to the end point to ensure that our members receive the necessary support when they deal with these matters on a regular basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Brian. That point about resource and demand is well made. In terms of, is it Rob? You got any comments from ASPS? Association
Thank you,
Police
Chair.
Superintendents?
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair. First thing to say is we're really supportive of the work that ACC Sutherland was describing in terms of utilising the police treatment centres to provide that wellbeing support. I'm a trustee of the centres. They do really important work, which is really valuable in terms of helping officers who've been exposed to that level of trauma. So really supportive of that in particular. I guess for my members, it's less about exposure to acute trauma than it is about the chronic impact of workplace stress. So last year we saw numbers of our members drop to really the lowest level in living memory, and certainly the lowest level since the inception of Police Scotland, and that's had a really significant impact on some members. We've seen a sharp uptick in the number of members reporting with work-related stress, with workplace-related grievances. And latterly in 2024, we're really pleased to see those numbers come back up as a result of the appointment of a round of promotions, whether substantive or temporary. But we do remain with some concerns around about the resilience of the number of supers and chief supers that we've got within Police Scotland, because I think it's important to say, wellbeing is at its core is not about hotlines and webinars. It's about making sure that we have the sufficient resource to achieve the task that we're set. So that's an area that we do continue to have concern around about, possibly in the same manner that Brian's describing there. But there are, that's not to say there aren't some significant and positive steps forward in this area. We look forward to working with the force to continue that going forward.
Thanks for that. And of course, there's the work around the workforce plan, which would be very relevant there. David, Malcolm, Unison.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this today. I think there's some interesting things for me to pull out in terms of the staff voice. With regards to trauma, I'd be interested in seeing, the stats as they improve, and the statistical analysis we'll get access to, what it will tell us in terms of the trauma experienced by, for example, call takers, forensic scene examiners, who are, all under significant pressure constantly through their workloads and what they're exposed to. And certainly, I don't get anything from members telling me that they feel that they're being supported to go to, wellbeing seminars or weekends that are helping them through these issues. Custody as well, I think, there's a lot of pressure in that area of the business. People exposed to injury at work, risk of injury at work, injuries, and how they can actually, flexibly move in the workplace when they're going through that process. It's very restrictive on staff, so I'm interested to see what that pulls out in terms of the stats. I'd just pull out in reference to occupational health and referrals, etc. Obviously, the bottleneck in that system is causing concern. Currently, I've looked at my stats this morning. In terms of cases, my branch is carrying 12 cases of discrimination, which the vast majority of them are about the fact that people cannot get reasonable adjustments for disabilities, and that's a problem. So obviously we're actively pursuing that. But I thought it was useful to get that picture of how the staff issue sits. I know that there's a lot of, as Rob, my colleague Rob Hayes said there's a lot of work for people to do and fewer people to do it. And the decisions are very much for local managers to decide on what work we're doing. But my experience is they're very risk averse to make these decisions unless they come from the top. And then we find ourselves stalled that the work is still there and people are feeling their health and well-being being significantly impacted by stress. And then that leads to other problems with their health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just check, David, I've brought you in for question, and I'm just you and the chair. Are there other unions that I should be bringing in at this time that are on the call, or are you the union rep?
I'm here for Unison.
Right.
They also
are there any other
Unite the Union? But I
okay.
don't know if they're here.
Is there a Unite representative on the call? Okay.
Tom, we don't have the representative today.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I was being inclusive. That's the main thing, and all the points made are very relevant. Can I ask board members, on reflection to some of the points that were raised, is there any further areas you'd like to explore by questions at this stage? Okay. So there's a couple of points that came out there. The one that was quite piercing, actually, in terms of getting my attention, was the issues in getting access to occupational health or reasonable adjustments, and that translating into possible claims of discrimination. Katie, is there any comments you can give us on, because I know there are ongoing discussions around that contract, so which is obviously a matter for the management of it rather than the governance of it, but in terms of that access to occupational health, is there a response you could give us?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, it's not actually the access to occupational health, it's access to work, which is a Department of Work and Pensions scheme. So slightly different lens. I think occupational health, we manage the contract and the performance of that contract on an ongoing basis, and we'll bring that back as part of the August reporting. It's the access to work piece where there are quite considerable delays in that process. So we're looking at alternative solutions, which might be, for example, securing money internally in order to buy, whether it's standing desks or other types of reasonable adjustments, which are probably our main areas that we get asked for, and seeing if we can almost bank some of that equipment somewhere so that we can respond more quickly to some of the asks. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah,
David, can I just come back to you, David, in terms of those areas of concern that you were raising? Does that recognition of the issues around access to work and trying to move budget in around that, etc., does that some way alleviate that?
No, I mean it's still problems in both. We see very slow response to occupational health that's problematic. It extends people's, when they're off sick unnecessarily, in our view, and that's still a problem. Access to work is also, the thing, but obviously it's is it a charity, the access to work? Is it registered as a charity? But it's government funded money. The organisation needs to find ways to be paying for people's reasonable adjustments. I've got people going long periods of time without receiving these adjustments in any way, and really any action getting taken of them. It's been flagged up with P&D, but I thought it was useful for attendees here to know about.
Okay, thanks. Your points made there, Katie. I see you put your hand up there.
If I could, so where we do see delays in occupational health actually is where we've got a reliance on GP or specialists reports particularly. And that is where we absolutely can see a month, 2 months, sometimes 3 month delays in terms of making sure that when the request goes out to GPs or specialists, waiting for those to come back in so that a determination can be made.
Okay, so I don't suppose that will be a new issue, and it'll be ongoing, but the areas that we can seek to expedite the situation facing an employee, i.e., as you said, standing desks, etc. Those are that with some active management, we should be able to do something there. The other final question in this section for myself is, TRIM is undoubtedly a huge commitment for the workforce, both in terms of like first line managers providing that support here now, and staff feeling they're getting support, etc. You look at the positive initiatives. We've heard one in Maryhill. I've heard of that elsewhere, and using those wider resources, etc. But it's then the active management of the impact of that going forward. You know, if someone who's experienced a very traumatic situation, been left in a very stressful position without recognition of it, could be further damaging, etc. So how do we support TRIM with that ongoing operational management of the situation? ACC Sutherland, are you able to sort of give us some enlightenment into that?
I can give you my views, Chair, and for what it's worth. I think it gets quite complex when you move from fairly, without kind of a best word to describe this, not necessarily lower level TRIM, but straightforward, challenging incidents. We have the skills and capacity within the organisation to deal with that through our trauma specialists who can provide that support. When you then move into people who are more psychologically damaged, you move beyond the expertise of as us as Police Scotland in terms of dealing with that, and you move into a more complex environment of requiring that individual to seek support through mental health and psychological experts, through their own GPs, through other services, and also through our own through our employee assistance programme. So I suppose there are effectively three layers of how we try and deal with that. One, hopefully at its lowest level, is dealt with within the operational sphere through the trauma training that we have. We're then into that employee assistance programme where we can provide access to psychological support and counselling, and beyond that we're then really requiring the support of the health professionals who can deliver what is then probably out with the capabilities of what we can deliver within policing. I think the key for me within all of that, and really kind of feeds back to Alistair's point about the importance of supervisors and the importance of first line managers, is providing ongoing welfare support that is consistent, that is empathetic, that is involved. And actually, you know, there is a point in time where we have to hand that over, and probably rightly so, that we have to hand that over to other professionals. But what we need to do as well is learn from that, because we can't just then have it happening again. So what we need to do is make sure that we're also continuing to debrief and learn from, you know, actually rather than just then causing harm to other officers who go into the same circumstances. Is there anything we can do differently, and can we, and how do we take that forward? So that for me is the kind of three levels, if you like, of where we are, and how we then try and connect them up through that support from first line supervisors throughout.
Thanks for that. I mean, it's a very complex area, but what I'm taking from the responses is that it is we're not blind to it. We're actively managing it and recognising that there are external inputs and I suppose in sometimes causes delay as well, that's out with our control, but we work with that. So thank you. I'm going to move on. We'll take paper two, but can I make a suggestion for the management of the meeting? I'll take union and staff association views into account at the end of the paper 2.3, so 2.3, the discussions, and then bring it in so we've got those inputs at that point, just to make us this is making progress. And that way we're sort of grouping item 2 agendas here. So paper 2.2, Patrick Brown, in terms of the workforce survey, can I invite you to present the paper? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So hopefully members will have had a chance to read the accompanying briefing paper and report that has been submitted on the thematic analysis of the open-end responses to the survey. As Mr. Hay has already kind of highlighted, a key part of our vision is a thriving workforce, and we recognise that the voice of our officers and staff is critical to this successful delivery. So we did kind of commission the workforce survey in 2024 to ensure that all our workforce were able to be, give their voice and continue to help shape the change across the service. At this last committee, which I must admit I was not present at, we did discuss the headline results of our 2024-25 workforce survey. And today's report is not new findings. It is meant to complement those initial findings of the quantitative results. And now we have the qualitative results from the free text comments. So this analysis has been provided independently by our survey provider, and they've undertaken the analysis of the free text comments by colleagues across the 7 questions where text was able to be input. You'll note in the slide pack we've only actually reported on 6. That is because we've grouped question 46 and 47, which were very similar together, and provided that overall analysis. And ultimately, this kind of text comment provides us with further insight into the areas that our workforce have identified for improvement. I don't plan to go through kind of every kind of slide in the full detail of the report, but what I would highlight is the following kind of emerging themes that have been grouped together from the analysis to show the areas of improvement that our workforce are seeking to see. And that is really, one, around the treatment of officers and staff who are verbally and physically assaulted in the line of duty. 2, there was a feeling that there's a disconnect between Police Scotland's values and the lived experiences of some colleagues. Concerns around grievance procedures for incidents involving colleagues. How could we improve senior leader communication to the workforce? Concerns around resourcing levels. And obviously, we've already had quite a conversation on well-being, which is a kind of key priority of our workforce as well. Whilst there has been positive feedback, and we do recognise that, particularly the strong ethos of teamwork, there has been some tough messages through this kind of qualitative analysis. But we are listening to our workforce, and we are working to improve the experiences of our people by using this as a baseline, to kind of move forward. So I just want to highlight some of the work that we're already doing to kind of take this forward. So this really includes around resourcing the development of a sustainable operating model moving forward. A real continued focus on your safety matters, which delivers a clear message that violence and abuse is simply not part of the job. And that was a quote that was frequently appeared throughout the survey findings. And we should also highlight that we are actively raising this with the wider justice system, with the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. The Chief Constable has raised that at a recent engagement with them. We're already progressing key milestones, including the implementation of DES, the digital evidence sharing capability, the contract award for national rollout of body-worn video, and the establishment of a mental health task force. Under the leadership of ACC Payton, Policing Together continues to drive the sustainable, meaningful change required to become an anti-racist and anti-discriminatory police service, which stands against sexism, misogyny, homophobia, and all forms of discrimination. And finally, as we've just heard, there obviously are continued challenges around our health and wellbeing support, but we have invested almost £17 million over 4 years to support the health and wellbeing of the workforce. This investment has provided colleagues with an improved employee assistance programme and new occupational health service. And as ACC Sutherland has already pointed, we are looking at further measures in next year's budget to support further kind of wellbeing work. It is worth noting that the experience that colleagues have shared with us through this workforce survey aren't necessarily new, and many will recognise these insights as part of your ongoing discussions through these forums. But what this does do is give us a baseline now to work from. So colleagues have shared their thoughts and experiences about how we now improve on that together. So I just want to highlight some further next steps before I hand over to questions. So we are continuing to align survey insights with our 2030 vision and 3-year business plan. We're understanding the results more fully and taking action at national and local levels. Both the quantitative and qualitative reports have been issued to every kind of division and head of service, and each division and business area have been asked to identify 3 key improvement activities to progress in the year, and each area is due to report on that for the first time on Friday, the 28th of February. So the end of this week, we should receive the first elements of action plans in from parts of the business. Obviously, an important part is conducting a lesson learned exercise on the process of this survey before we launch the 2025 survey over kind of late summer, early autumn. I think kind of one of the key challenges has just been like the timeliness of producing the results, and we really need to take that on board and ensure we've resourced it to, you know, make the responses a lot quicker, because we are committed to yearly surveys, and it's vital that our officers and staff get to input and see that progress has been made, that they have a voice and they will act on what they say to improve their experience, but most importantly to support them to be a thriving workforce and better to support the communities of Scotland. Whistle stop tour, Chair. Hopefully I've not taken too much time to introduce it, but I have nothing further to add, but obviously welcome any questions or comments, and ACC Peyton, who's been leading a lot of the work on all this, will also support me with any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Patrick. There's a lot of key issues in there. Katrina, you've put your hand up first.
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I actually, Patrick, you've addressed quite a number of the questions that I had in a way, which is great. I mean, obviously this paper very much interrelates to the one we've just considered, and looking at it, the view I'm getting is very much what you mentioned there about some of the key things point to maybe historical, cultural norms and expectations and pressures. And but the other thing that actually stood out for me is also goes back to something that Alistair mentioned in the conversation about the last paper, which is about the key role and the value of the kind of line management, the kind of, you know, and so I guess I do have a kind of question around resourcing of that particular group of people, if you like, who are going to play a key role in a lot of this, and you know how well resourced they are to respond to reports of incidents, both in terms of incidents with the public and in terms of incidents within the police force itself and with colleagues. So I guess you've talked about key milestones. You've talked about you know the action plan. So I guess my main question is really around the big picture. And again, you talked about that about you know bringing things in across Scotland, both at a local and a national level. So you know, I'm just thinking, how are you going to what's the plan to evaluate the impact of all this work and to ensure that there is a coherence and which is one of Alistair's terms again, and consistency of approach across all of this area?
Thank you, Katrina. I'll kind of make a start and then just introduce kind of ACC Peyton. So just first of all, looking at kind of the resourcing question, the survey comes out really quite kind of strongly in terms of the support of the first line managers and the kind of local teams when incidents occur. That was kind of one of the really kind of, for me personally and as a person, of a heartwarming element of it, that people and our officers and staff felt well supported at that kind of front line level. I think the bigger challenges is particularly around the issues around assaults, is the speed, etc., which is managed within the kind of wider criminal justice system. So ACC Middleton and myself are working very closely with the Crown and Procurator Fiscal Service, just looking at the evidence, the timeliness and the success rate. For example, one of the things that came out about, you know, are individuals prosecuted for kind of assaulting officers, etc. So we're looking at kind of the kind of onward rate of further kind of prosecutions on that. So that will be kind of a work in progress. Around the evaluation, that's really important, and I think kind of one of the key elements of the evaluation process here is the second survey. We now have the baseline. We are now putting plans in place and you know, new kind of themes of work, etc., to address these issues. The evaluation will be are our workforce feeling a difference when they are asked the same set of questions in 2025? And if not, that then becomes the basis to which we evaluate whether our interventions have been successful or not, and continuing to review that and kind of getting feedback from our workforce on a regular basis. But I'll stop there and just introduce if ACC Peyton wants to offer anything further, because she's been leading some of these areas.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for your question, Katrina. I think the one thing I would want to I suppose, say at the start is the progress that we've seen just even in the process of the survey in and of itself. 11,000 people responded, over 23,000 comments. And I guess for me, if I think back to, you mentioned, Katrina, around some of the historical challenges, historically we wouldn't have had that level of engagement. And right at the outset of a lot of this work, our desire has been to get our people talking and keep them talking, because even if they're talking about things that are concerning them, it's demonstrating that we're building that environment where people feel psychologically safe to have it. So for me, that's the first starting point around mapping out that progress and being able to see the development. But just a couple of things, I don't want to veer too much onto the paper that we're going to hear about next, but of course, our culture dashboard and the work we're doing under the Policing Together programme is really key to all of this as the umbrella structure that we have in place. So the survey results are being aligned and mapped into our Policing Together implementation plan, so that we can align those activities within that programme of work, and also across into our culture dashboard as we start to then understand what activities are starting to have an impact. And of course, as you know, there's no one thing. It's going to be the sum of all these parts, but you'll know through some of the other work we're doing in Policing Together the importance of being able to understand and evaluate, and also understand where we're not having an impact and what more we can do. And just to touch on the point you made about the importance of supervisors, you're absolutely right, and a big part of the survey demonstrated that it's really important that our staff are seeing from and hearing from their own supervisors locally. Who says is often more important than what's said. So we're trying to encourage a whole programme of engagement and conversations and communication. I met with mid-level managers last week, over 137 of them, encouraging them to continue to have those conversations, to keep their people talking. And over the coming weeks ahead of the next survey, as Patrick mentioned, we are continuing to keep those themes and the work that we're doing front and centre, and making sure that we're providing opportunity for that ongoing dialogue and conversation. So hopefully that gives a bit of reassurance around our focus on this, Katrina.
Thank you very much. And actually, it's really encouraging and really interesting, very positive. I guess actually your responses led me on to thinking in terms of the actual reporting and all this work to this committee and to the various bodies, because actually, they do all seem to interrelate, and the actual reports don't necessarily reflect that it's all part of this coherent or consistent kind of body of work that's going on. And it's not the first time since I've been on the board that I've actually felt you're almost sometimes you're not doing yourselves favours. You're not actually identifying always the successes and the improvements and all that. So anyway, thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Straight to yourself, Alistair.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Patrick, and appreciate the time that's been taken to analyse the free text comments and how you've mapped them to a lot of the action plans and the strategies that are in place within Police Scotland. So I've got a quick question on that, which was, when you did that mapping, did you find any gaps? Was there anything that surprised you from the free text analysis? And then I've got a specific question, which is around, for the first time, I think you said within the divisions, they've got to pick up on three areas of improvement. So that to me is about empowerment across the organisation, where the divisional commanders and their teams, they need to understand what their responsibilities are, and they're part of that. They've got choice in there. But the second part is their authority to act, and that involves, at times, if they choose to do something, it'll need to be resourced. So what's the mechanism in place, to back up that empowerment process. And then you've already spoken about the final part of it, about how people will be held to account through the evaluation. So that specific resourcing around, you know, these divisional areas, the 3 areas they're going to pick up, how's that happening?
Brilliant. Thanks, Alistair. Happy to again make a start and just bring the ACC kind of patent in. So just in terms of your last point about, you know, empowerment, this is exactly the kind of key, and one of the things that ACC patent has just mentioned is about teams are wanting to kind of see the visibility about their middle leaders and see them, and we are very much, and the Chief has emphasised the importance of kind of empowerment to manage these issues locally while we support it kind of the national level as well. So empowerment is absolutely kind of key to bring that forward. In terms of authority to act and the support that we are giving, so there's a number of ways that we're doing this. So through our kind of people partners, we are asking, as part of the 3 kind of points, is build this into your people plan, and our people partners are there to support. My own team in strategy and analysis are providing all the detail and the free text comments down at a divisional level as well, so they can see the kind of exact wording of how officers and staff are feeling within these divisions. So we're leaning in to provide that analytical support. We have obviously got our comms teams aligned throughout kind of divisions. So we're asking our comms leads to obviously support commanders and heads of service within their areas about how we kind of communicate and engage with the workforce in this. So they're kind of 3 kind of key elements. Some of the areas where it does require financial resource that we've already kind of touched on, in ACC Sutherland touched on about wellbeing, that will come with difficult choices. We are asking, you know, teams locally to be empowered to manage their non-pay budget, to invest within kind of guidelines around wellbeing to do that, be empowered as a budget holder to do that, and that's kind of some of the decisions that we are taking there. In terms of, just before I bring ACC patent in terms of the gaps, I think the main lesson we actually learned were how closely related some of the questions were, rather than actual gaps in responses coming back. It was the nature of repetitiveness, because some of the questions were so closely aligned, like 46 and 47. That's something we would review going into next year as part of the lessons learned about, do we reword some of those questions to kind of, you know, kind of increase the scope of what we're covering, or actually do we reduce them to become more focused on some of the issues? But we will review that once all the analysis complete. We'll take views of our survey kind of supplier, but there was no big gaps, Alistair, from all the work in the analysis, and I've read every kind of report for every kind of division in this, and there's no big gaps standing out from my perspective that I can see. But as ever, welcome feedback from our unions and staff associations if you feel there's any gaps, and we've been doing engagement sessions with the unions and staff associations on the free text comments over the last number of weeks, and there's nothing strongly coming out in gaps there. What they're more interested in is any demographical breakdown we can do, and we will continue to do that over kind of the coming weeks. But I'll stop there, but ACC patent may wish to add from an operational perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Happy to do that. And again, Alistair, thank you for your question. I think probably reflecting on how I would respond to that, I would put my not so distant past hat on as a divisional commander and think, you know, what kind of role would I have? Would I feel empowered? And how would I support the line managers and supervisors within the divisions and departments in that same way? And I think, as Patrick's alluded, I think that's one of the reasons why we've tried to focus on, you know, 2 or 3 things that the divisions can do, because of course there's lots that we can do, but it's trying to manage expectations about prioritising and then having that kind of focus and committing time. Greatest reflection of what matters to us is how we spend our time. So, you know, identifying 2 or 3 things means that we're not asking for the world to change, but we are asking for that committed and concerted effort, because it's the things that our staff have said really matter to us. And I guess, you know, what we are trying to do is make sure that across the piece, the work that we're doing at a strategic level isn't so strategic that it's not visible, and that's where the kind of, you know, national to local and local to national really works. So as an example, part of the work that we've got is is feedback from divisions every month to tell us what they're doing, so that when we're putting messaging out, we can talk about the big theme, Alistair, but we can also align that to what some divisions are doing, sharing some of that best practice and continuing to connect the work and the progress that is done, because of course all the things that we're talking about, there isn't a quick fix. So it's been able to maintain, you know, that kind of patience and perseverance, and whilst police might be relentless, it's certainly not hopeless. So being able to, you know, put in there that kind of positive narrative as well around the work and helping that come to life at a local level. But certainly there's the empowerment. I know that's not always a felt experience, but I guess that's where we continue to have to challenge ourselves to see, is what we're intending having that impact at a local level? And if not, what are the barriers? Why is that? Is it down to leadership, or is it down to process and practice, and continually challenge ourselves to improve that? But hopefully you will see over the, you know, the coming weeks as we move towards the next survey, some of that real tangible local, national conversations that are having an impact.
Thanks. I was still quite content with it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, and I personally couldn't overstate how important getting that empowerment bit right, and I really welcome the approach that's being taken, and people experiencing improvement at that, you know, local level, because not two parts of Scotland are the same. There's nuance in it all. I think getting that right is key to success, so I really welcome it.
So picking up in that nuance of local as opposed to versus national, Patrick, in terms of the analysis of what the survey is telling us, and cutting it in terms of, for instance, characteristics, police officers and police staff, divisions, departments, are you able to dissect the data and give us a picture to show us where difference is, in order that we can work towards a plan for empowerment?
So that's what the executive are reviewing just now, Chair, in terms of, so we are able to produce the results down to every kind of division and head of kind of service level. It is out, and the executive are kind of managing that along with the ACCs and their divisional commanders. And the big part here is looking, as you say, about where there's good practice and where we can learn and share that best practice kind of going forward. We are able to split the results by officers and staff, and you'll see that we've done that through kind of various reports provided to the committee already. The next step, which we've not really done, is down to the kind of demographics, protected kind of characteristics, which really supports the work of some of our staff associations, and that work is ongoing this week to hopefully be able to share that over the kind of coming weeks with those staff associations.
And that's what I mean. It's not just held; it's actually shared.
Yes, we can look to see what is possible to kind of share with the committee, and obviously we can have discussions on that kind of going forward.
Thanks. I know you had your hand up. Just have you any reflection on that?
It was just to say, Tom, what we're really keen to do is going back to the point that Alistair made around that empowerment locally, you know, from divisional commanders, knowing their areas, knowing their staff. They've got their the information that enables them to put into practice what's relevant for us. I think one of the areas that's really important, aligned to your question, Chair, is through the Policing Together performance and tasking group, where we're looking at if there's themes emerging, and we do it in that way, not necessarily getting into divisional level. We know some of the challenges when we do a bit of compare and contrast you know, at that level, but certainly looking at areas where we know we are have minoritized communities that we would want to look and say, is there a difference or a disproportionality in how people are feeling? That will be a key part of the performance and tasking group, the Policing Together performance and tasking group. So again, that we're doing that, and we're doing it as a collective organisation, looking at it because that's a priority for us, rather than lots of different pieces of work being asked of the same information and the same people that are responsible for it. But hopefully you'll see that in time coming through your own oversight board, some of the if there is disproportionality or a difference in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty cautious. It's not for reporting to the committee here about where the difference is, but I suppose the themes of what difference is, in order we can look at what the emphasis is. DCC Spears, welcome. You've got your hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to pick up a couple of points in that in this piece, and I think one of the things that we've been acutely aware, sitting with the chief, Tom, is we want the survey to be an annual survey, and sometimes when you're cutting a cake, it's how many different ways would you want to cut the cake. I think we've probably reached a position within the executive that we've had a couple of breakdowns on the survey. We understand some of the commonality in themes. So I think there's some consistency across the organisation around what are some of the burning issues. What we've agreed as an executive that we won't do is start to almost create some sort of league table that would suggest that Mark's got a bit of work to do in the West because it looks better in the North. I think what's more important is that the disaggregated data that business leads and divisions have got have given them something to work with. And my ask of Patrick and his team has been, how best do we support those sort of business areas? It's no lost on me either that it's no comparing necessarily like for like. The demands in C3 as it affects our staff could be very different from the demands that's in Inverness with frontline officers. So I wouldn't anticipate any further product coming through the chief in the depths. But what we will look for is the progress that's been made to address some of the matters that are arising, so that we can factor that into what would be the next survey. So preparation for our next survey is literally only just a few months away. So maybe I guess I'm just trying to offer just a bit of realism in terms of what else might come back here. I think what the committee would be interested in is what progress are we actually making, and I think that's something that we could definitely bring back.
Yeah, I mean, but the conversation about league tables is in the past. There's absolutely no way that there's an intention or desire in the board to get into that culture, and that's why I was quite explicit when I spoke to Kat there about, that's not what we're talking about when we're looking at what we're interested in is what are the issues that are different, and that we know that those then are areas that that you either say, but that's because of it's apples and pears, or that is because we have work to do there. That is of interest to the committee, and is more a narrative than presenting the raw data. So I totally support that. But what I would ask though is, does the survey give us an opportunity for benchmarking, in the sense of it's a high level theme that we know where we are in terms of engagement compared to other similar organisations? I mean, I don't want to start saying this is what we need or that need, but it's just the principle of benchmarking. Is that something that's been taken into consideration? Patrick?
So it's difficult because each survey per organisation has been kind of constructed in different ways. What we will do, and I'll kind of look to Progressive, our partner, on this to see if there are any kind of areas that we can kind of benchmark. Originally, when we did try to do that, so it was a bit like comparing apples and pears, because some of the surveys kind of look at kind of different themes. But I'll take that away, Tom, and just it's
just reflection.
Possible, but you have to take into account the differing demographics, the different cultures of the organisation, the different sizes. But we can certainly take an action away and see what.
Patrick, I don't want to make it an action. It was just more a reflection. This is a discussion point. That's also the point's been made, and I'm no doubt you reflect that and internalise it. Alan, you had your hands up, bit of answered that.
Yeah, I think you have. I think we've seen some early work from the providers around benchmarking, and we found it quite unhelpful because it quite simply wasn't a comparison. So we kind of dismissed that and just said, let's put our energy into focusing on the areas within the organisation where we can make a positive difference.
Okay, I think it's an area to keep under consideration. Okay, as I said to our colleagues from Staff Association Unions, if you bear with me, I'll go straight to item 2.3 and then we can come back and have a broader discussion. So paper 2.3 is the twice yearly update and the HMICS Culture Review Action Plan progress. Kat, it's still with yourself, please.
Thanks, Chair. And I will just very quickly touch on a few points in the paper, obviously taking it as read, but I think it probably sits well within some of the conversation that's already taken place around, you know, at times a complex and cluttered landscape, and that's certainly been the case when we think about, you know, the breadth of information and inspections and reports that we've had as it relates to culture. The purpose of this part is obviously to outline our approach to the culture improvement activity. We know obviously HMICS did their inspection and reported on that back in December 23 with 23 areas of improvement and 11 recommendations. We created at that time a culture oversight group, which was pretty much, you know, recognising and reflecting that culture sits across the whole of the organisation. So we had a number of leads supporting that group to develop our improvement plan, again, which we took to HMICS. The paper draws out the fact that, you know, as we've been looking at this, and I mentioned earlier about policing together and that kind of overall umbrella programme, that the oversight moving forward for this activity will be through the Policing Together implementation group, which is chaired by my Chief Superintendent, Jordana Emerson, but obviously means that I also have oversight. But I think one of the things that I really wanted to emphasise was the work that has been done, Chair, to map and align all of the work that has gone previously in relation to culture and starting to align that both with our Policing Together strategy and also the Chief's new vision and 3-year business plan. That mapping and alignment work was quite considerable, but was really important so that we were able to provide that clear direction and be able to much more cohesively map progress. But it did result in about 230 recommendations across 7 key themes that the paper draws out, so I won't go into them. But what we've been doing is putting all of that onto our 4-action system so that we can start to, as I say, align, reduce duplication, and enables us to have that kind of quality assurance and scrutiny of our reporting process going forward. All of that work has resulted in us identifying that we've probably got about 13 master commitments. So we do have 13, what we're calling 13 master commitments. 13 really big, you know, high-level themes and commitments that we believe will take us to the place where we want to be, where we do have a welcoming, inclusive culture. And there's 79 tasks that support that. And all of that pretty much is, the paper is reflecting that we've successfully brought together all of the reports, the inspection recommendations, the areas of development as it relates to ED&I, culture and human rights into one Policing Together implementation plan, and it shows how it aligns to all of the other work. Where that then is adding value moving forward is as we continue to develop our culture dashboard and then start to identify the measures that, going back to Katrina's point right from the start of today's meeting, how do we understand the impact and the progress that we're making in that area? And as I say, that's very much the next stages around our development of our culture dashboard. The paper also is suggesting that our desire is that this improvement plan is actually captured as part of our Policing Together performance report, which we do biannually in May and November. Again, probably coming back to the point that was raised by Katrina just around the different ways in which some of this work is reported. We just feel that there's an opportunity where as it relates to the culture inspection and some of the work here, we could add that onto our overall Policing Together performance report moving forward. We have on this paper just provided you with the HMICS report with some of the work that's been done to date and the progress to date. So I'm happy to take any questions, but hopefully that gives a bit of reassurance around our desire to map and align all of this and do it in a really streamlined way, and actually to show how it is showing tangible progress towards our Policing Together commitments, our 3-year business plan commitments, and that's probably something that I can visually bring back to the group at some future stage. Okay, I'll pause here for questions, Chair.
Right, thank you. Open it up for questions. Alistair?
Yeah, really appreciate the work that is going on in this area. And I think that mapping and alignment exercise, complex as it is, I think it's crucial to the success going forward. The only worry I have in it is when you do a mapping and alignment exercise, there can be a danger that some things get lost, and some nuance in particular gets lost. So I'm just wondering about the checks and balances that you have to prevent that, Kat, and also you know, the originators of some of the work that you're aligning. Are you linking them with them and giving them feedback to make sure that they recognise where their reports, their recommendations are all heading?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's a really good point, Alistair. And for the little reassurances, I like to be in the detail, and so I would hate to think, you know, that by mapping or aligning something we lose, you know, as you've rightly said, the crucial nuance of some of the specific recommendations. But when you see it actually lined out, we capture we haven't lost anything there. They're all there, and we quite clearly show the source as to why we've come by that master commitment. So here's all the pieces of work, whether it's been from our IRG report, HMICS inspection, the baseline. So we're really clear of what was said there, so that when we're mapping the tasks that we believe are the vehicle and the drivers for that progress, we're really clear that they actually are delivering in every single one of those individual initial kind of comment recommendations. So hopefully, you know, you'll see as that work progresses that we will not be missing any of the nuance piece, because they're there, they've not been taken out. It's just that we are saying that here's the activity, streamlined, cohesive, that's going to take us towards that commitment.
Okay, Alistair?
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thanks. I'll go to Katrina Stewart. Her hand was up first, then I'll come to you, Maggie. Katrina?
Thanks, Tom. I have a very specific question, really, around some of the analysis. Have any barriers been identified? Are there any barriers identified within the promotions management structure and processes to the encouragement of individuals, for whatever reason, applying for promotions? The reason I'm asking, actually, it is an area that I've actually kind of thought about quite a lot over the last few years. And again, it goes back to maybe historical cultural attitudes or whatever. So that's my question. I actually do have something I'd really like to share with you as well, Tom, Chair, if you wouldn't mind just giving me a few seconds, because I think it's really important given the people that are sitting here at this meeting. And because it was out on LinkedIn, it's obviously public knowledge, but I think it's important to acknowledge where there are and celebrate where there are achievements and triumphs. Is that okay, Chair? It won't take me very long.
There you go.
Okay, so this was in response to something on LinkedIn, and it's a woman who put up this post saying, "I started working for the police in 1989. I struggled, I was bullied relentlessly, and every night when I closed my eyes, I planned how I was going to commit suicide as I saw no other way out. Fast forward 34 years with a diagnosis of ADHD. A few months ago, I explored going back to work for Police Scotland. I could not commend them highly enough for the non-judgmental help and support they offered. Well done for all the collective efforts." I really thought it was worth sharing that with the people at this meeting. So I'll go back to my question now.
I think it would be fair to say that I sighed a relief at the end of that, and I'm grateful to you for sharing it, because it really underpins the commitment and the work that's often unseen in this working here, and there's people in this call who have led that, so thanks for sharing it. Come back to barriers to promotion, Kat, and if you want to reflect on anything else, you're more than welcome.
Well, first reflection would just be thank you for sharing that, Katrina, and I think, you know, I think I've often said, you know, criticism does much, encouragement does much more. So it's good to be encouraged that, you know, that people do have you know, an experience which is really positive, and grateful for you sharing that with us. I think the other question, I think there's a paper later around promotions, that there is no doubt that whether actual promotion process or perceptions of promotion processes are still very real for all of our officers and staff across the organisation. I know that Katie Miller and her team have done a huge amount of work around understanding that. Some of the work that we've got ongoing just now, as well as utilising the expertise of our fair play advisor to, you know, again, so that we can go in and start to understand process perceptions and be really clear, so that we're starting to manage expectations as well as making the improvements that we need. So is it a perception issue, or is it actually the reality of some of the challenges? But a real key focus for us, because as you've rightly mentioned, it comes up frequently, and that's why it's a focus for our fair play advisor over the coming weeks and months, working with Katie's team in this area as well, to continue to give ourselves the confidence, and also our staff the confidence that, you know, our promotion process is absolutely fair and does not have barriers that would prevent, particularly as it relates to those from minoritised groups. So hopefully that reassures a bit.
Can I ask, given the importance of people and development in this, Katie, in terms of the people feeling that the promotion process is fair and is open to everyone, can you pick up on this as well, in terms of how we prepare people and how we make sure that fairness is actually from a directorate reaching into the operational areas, whether it be policing on police staff, that is maintained?
Thank you, Chair. So at 3.2, the paper on recruitment, promotion and succession, that there's a detail in there about the promotions specifically. I think what we have seen is since November 2023, I think it's 645 officers have been promoted, and but what sits underneath that is a number of officers that would have gone forward for promotion but actually haven't been successful. And as was to Katrina's point there, it's a review of both the process but also the colleague experience and the perception of the process, which actually in some ways outweighs the process itself. So it's that transparency, it's the fairness. Do I understand what I'm being assessed against? Am I getting good feedback that's constructive, it's honest, but it helps me, go forward, etc. And actually last week, I was out visiting some officers, and what I did hear, kind of sat for a couple of hours, was the sense of the promotion panel and that kind of almost kind of anxiety that builds up in officers in readiness for the panels. So we've been running workshops around promotions specifically. We've run 3 so far, and I think we've had probably 20, 30, 40 people at each of the workshops, including our staff associations, that is specifically around what is it that we can still improve on. And I think there's some pieces that we can do around the panel itself. So I am holding a question about the construction of the panel. I don't mean panel members, but how we assess. There's also a bit for me about being clear on when somebody is ready now for a promotion versus you have talent, you have potential, but you're not quite ready yet. You might be ready in a year's time, and what can we do to help you in that development for the next year? And I don't think we're as strong in those conversations as we could be. And therefore, potentially there are people feeling compelled to come forward for promotion at this point in time, when perhaps to take 12 months step back and focus on their continual professional development actually might be more advantageous for them. So there's a lot in there. Separately, we have got a development plan that's coming on the back of the workshops, and that also looks at protected characteristics, etc. What we do see actually is we actually see women are more successful in the panels than male officers. What I am very conscious of is that we are silent on this in staff space. So as a member of staff, I feel passionate about this. 98% of my job at the moment around promotions is officer. We don't really do anything for staff, and I know that, and I know we need to get to that, and that's a personal commitment that I have.
Thanks. And we'll have the paper in the next phase of the meeting, but I just wanted the importance of this in terms of culture to allow you to show people the thought that's going into it and how it's a conscious issue for us. Katrina.
Just yes, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. And I'm going to have to give you my. I was so nervous about the other thing. I wanted to kind of share that actually I got my questioning timing completely wrong. I was, of course, asking a question to the later paper, but it's been really interesting. The response has been really interesting anyway. So thank you.
Okay, moving on. Maggie from HMICS, can you come in now, please?
Yeah, apologies. I understand that conversations kind of moved on from where we were, but it was just to reassure, give some reassurance around Alistair's questions. So HMICS have been meeting with Jordana and her team, and we welcome all the mapping and aligning that's been done in the implementation plan that's now there. Just so that there is no focus lost on our 23 AFDs and 11 recommendations. Jordana and the team are still providing evidence submissions to us individually on those, so we're keeping a track on them. And we don't, there's a lot of work still to be done, but we really acknowledge the work, really hard work that's been done, bringing it and aligning it. So it's just to give some reassurance around that.
That is a reassurance, and thanks for sharing that with us. I'm really grateful. Okay, so in terms of colleagues from unions and staff associations, can we start off with David? I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to comment then on the last two papers that we've seen, the staff survey. It's interesting that it draws out. As it broke down into the free text boxes, it draws out a lot of things that Unison have said to the organisation for a very long time, that people will not come forward to raise issues because of lack of support, because of poor management, because they cannot have, they can't take any faith in the fact that it will result in anything, any sort of outcome. And obviously we do have a standard operating procedure for grievances that says you can't raise a grievance because you're looking, one of the outcomes you can't ask for is for someone to be disciplined, which leads us into that perpetual circle of why is someone raising a complaint about someone's behaviour if they can't be guaranteed it's going to go anywhere. So I'm not surprised to see those things. We were asked for feedback via email, but didn't actually engage with any sort of discussion person to person or over Teams or WebEx with people on that. And I think that's something that I need to go and lean back into, because I think we would be very interested to explore that more. And to comment on the review action plan progress and reading it, I just feel it lacks staff voice, officer and staff, so workforce. On that, looking through some of those things were referred to as users and stakeholders, and I do think that staff voice needs to be more important in shaping these plans and the culture of the organisation. And that's me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, David, you've made your points, and the ears are listening to them. So I think we have the processes that are ongoing and stuff. And we'll continue to prompt and probe around staff voice in particular as we go through our agendas today and in the future. Is there any other comments anyone would want to make in relation to David's points, rather than get into the in-depth detail, which no doubt goes into the specific conversations? Okay, can I go first to Rob Hay?
Thanks very much, Chair. I guess our reflections would be there's some really tough messages for the organisation coming out of the survey, particularly as they relate to senior management. If you look at the survey, both the qualitative and quantitative feedback, there's some really negative comment around about senior management, and clearly that consists, mostly of my members within the service. As an association, we're not surprised by that result. I think the context for that has to be examined insofar as we've seen a reduction of over a third of superintendent ranks collectively since Police Scotland started. And actually that reduction was as much as 40% last year before the numbers came back up. So when we see criticism levelled around about communication and visibility, the reality is a vastly reduced cadre of people cannot offer the same visibility as they once did. At the same time, that same group of people have inherited duties from senior members of staff who we've had to say goodbye to through VR/ER as well. So you have a reducing number, a consistently reducing number of people taking on more and more duties in this space. So we are not surprised that there's been some really significant criticism levelled at those individuals. And I guess my caution to you would be, if you think that just to simply turn to that same group of people and say we now need to address these concerns, it just becomes another task that goes on to an ever increasing list. ACC Payton talked about setting up that routine reporting of progress in this area, but there isn't anything else that those local senior management teams or national senior management teams have been told. Don't do that, so that you can now concentrate on addressing these issues in terms of the staff survey. It's simply another thing that's been put onto the list of things that need to be achieved. And that's a real challenge, So when Patrick talks about a sustainable operating model and a target operating model, that's language we're really attracted to get to that position of sustainability. Because for our members at the moment, our own surveying sees that 97% are working, far beyond their routine working hours. We're seeing again a smaller cadre of people inheriting a rising number of specialist duties, event command, etc. So those two pieces will get to a point where they become unsustainable. So we're really committed and keen on that sense of achieving a sustainable model, and even the honest reflection around about some really positive steps forward that we've seen. The issue of promotion success was mentioned by Katie Miller. So for superintendents, we now have, as a proportion of superintendents, females are a higher proportion than of any rank within the organisation. 44% of superintendents are female. But what we also see is some of the unintended consequences of some of the really good work there around about higher numbers of people who are now doing compressed or flexible patterns, which means that people are not at their work as much, which comes back to that narrative around about reduced visibility of senior ranks as well. So we need to be honest and looking at those things, and accepting some really positive steps forward also come with some challenges that need to be managed as well. We're really interested to see what progress has been made when the survey comes out again this year, because my concern is without that there's challenges in the basic operating model that are pushing some of this stuff to a really challenging place, which is why we've seen that kind of uptick in terms of both grievance and members reporting challenges to their mental health and workplace related absence as a result of that sort of thing. That's all I have to say, Chair.
Well, from my perspective, that's fair and candid feedback, Rob. You've got the chair of Police and Performance Committee as a member of this committee, and I, as chair of this committee, as a member of the Police and Performance Committee. So I can be assured that in terms of when the work comes through with target operating model, etc., and into detail, these are areas that we are conscious of when we probe from our perspective as well. So thanks for that. Brian Jones from the Federation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this short and brief because it's been quite abstracted already. We support the survey, but we have to be careful what we ask for and the results you receive. So the big point from the SPF perspective is 52% of the respondents wouldn't recommend the police service to family or friends to join in the future. And that's something we have to change and address. And how do we do that with a shrinking workforce with ever greater demands? So we appreciate the work done with the survey. And if I come quickly to the promotion piece, from an SPF perspective, I think the force can't do more than what it's currently doing. I work regularly with the promotion group and assessing promotion panels and the additional work that they do. So I think we are addressing all the key concerns. And I think that sometimes the force actually bullies itself when it doesn't really need to, because the amount of work it does in that area is significant.
That's again, candid and fair feedback. Any final points from other committee members, board members? We'll move on then. Well, thanks. There's a lot in that. We've been going for 90 minutes. Can I suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break and keep your cameras on and put your cameras off, sorry, and we'll resume at 22.
Okay, that's great. Carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, welcome back to everyone. Where we are on the agenda is Area 3, Strategy, Policy and Planning, and the item 3.1 for discussions, the Workforce Dashboard. Can I invite Katie Miller?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just pull out two things if I can from the dashboard. First one is around the work that we're doing on employment policy. So the team have worked hard in developing an approach, a decision-making model, so that we've got a really clear picture on those policies that we're prioritising in terms of reviewing and taking through consultation. And we work with staff associations and trade unions in respect of that to make sure that we've got a really clear pipeline. We have about 21 policies in that pipeline at the moment, so that's reflective of about 18 months of work. But we know that as and when there, for example, there might be legislative changes, that that prioritisation changes. But that was a nice piece of work by the team to get clarity on that. The second bit is around mediation. So we now have 30 trained mediators within the organisation. There is an update included within the dashboard data. I think what we're finding here, though, and whether it's cultural or visibility, is that there's more capacity within that mediators network to do more with the organisation to try and resolve matters informally before perhaps we get to a formal grievance, and also for mediators to support perhaps post-process. So even when we've had a grievance and we've got an outcome of a grievance, there's still some situations where mediation would still help with those working relationships. Beyond that, I'm not going to call anything else out, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Invite questions from members. Paul Eady.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Katie. I've got three very quick questions. Firstly, turnover, the 1.18, that's in various different organisations, that seems remarkably low. And I'm assuming that's just the vocational nature of policing, that it's something you opt for as lifetime commitment. So that's just one observation. So the first question I've got is the rest days cancelled, which seems to have risen by approximately 15%. What's the story behind this?
Thank you. So on the leavers, it is a low turnover, and that would be my experience as well. What I would say is that excludes retirement, so
right.
Which obviously is the majority of the reasons for officers leaving. I'm going to see whether or not I've still got any. I see Mark's going to regret this, but he's on my screen and he's in my line of sight. Whether or not there's any particular operational insight in terms of the rest days cancelled. If not, I'll need to take that away, Paul, and see if we can give more detail.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I think we need to take that one away off the top of my head. There's not an obvious, I mean, Operation Moonbeam and other, obviously, some of those key big operations obviously have an impact. European football has an impact as well, because you don't know from once we're through group stages, you then don't know how often potentially, how long teams are then going to have, large fixtures, etc. But I'd need to take that away and have a wee look at what's driving that.
It'd be great if you did, and we can circulate that to members by correspondence in between. If there's follow-up that is required in the future, we can pick it up. But some insight to that would be helpful.
And the next question I've got is the OST out of card. I'm assuming that's officer safety training. What does out of card mean? And again, what are the implications of someone not having done that training?
Yeah, so out of card means behind with the training, but I'm going to bring Deb Spears in on this if I can. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's been a bit of a lag, Paul, in relation to the implications of COVID. So we, at different times, as a consequence of COVID, weren't able to provide officer safety training. So we offer some extensions. So when you do your officer safety training, it's relevant for 12 months. So at different points along the way, we've extended the period of time in which that's valid. Where we wanted to get back to is a position where going into the next financial year that everybody who should be trained, the training is up to date in relation to officer safety training. So I think we've worked incredibly hard in this space and now reached a point as we arrive at the 1st of March that pretty much everyone who should be trained is trained. Somebody who's out a card, the consequences of that would be they shouldn't be operationally deployed. So that's not a place we would want to be in. We offer more than enough training, and I'm pleased that we've got to a position where we don't have any risks within the organisation, that we've got people who should be trained but being deployed who are not trained, if that makes sense.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I was going to ask about the risks there, but if they're not deployed, does this mean that 20% are not able to be deployed at the moment? Or is there a workaround?
So the current position is that there'll be a number of people who will be out of card, but they could be out of card for medical reasons and health reasons, and they're probably not operationally deployed. The confidence I can give yourself and board members this morning is we don't have operationally deployable officers not being deployed because of this. So we've got to a position where we're right up to speed. So actually probably the data that's presented here is probably just a little bit out of date with where we are on the 25th of February. So it's been something that we've been reviewing on a weekly basis. Mark and others in local policing have been scrutinising this. So we've got to a position where the officers who need to be trained are trained.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
Come to Alistair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. One is on, the first one's on exit surveys from the organisation, and it looks like here that over 80% of people that leave are not completing, so I can't do arithmetic, over 70% of the people that are leaving are not completing an exit survey, which to me is we're losing out on a lot of valuable insight into people's experiences within policing. So I wonder what's being done to encourage more people to complete those exit surveys. And then my second question is in relation to the management of absence in the organisation. You know, it's been fairly consistent in my time, certainly in the board, the sort of levels of absence and working days lost. And it highlights in the dashboard that the cost of that's £22 million. And I know this all ties back into much of what we've discussed earlier around well-being and all the supporting mechanisms there. But I just wondered if there was any comment on how we're seeking to, you know, improve for the benefit of employees and the benefit of the public, and the management of absence within the organisation.
The 2 points raised there, exit surveys and management of absence. Who's going to respond to that? Is it yourself, Katie?
I think it is, yes. So on exit interviews, we did do an end-to-end review of exit interviews last year. So that was both the questionnaire, how it was deployed, how it's positioned with colleagues, etc. I think what we're perhaps finding is that particularly because we have such a high number of officers who leave through retirement, we tend to get less exit interview questionnaires back from them. And maybe that's because of the choice in which they're leaving the organisation, perhaps, would be one reflection. What we do, I'd also say, having, you know, kind of other organisational experience, I'd say the levels are probably consistent with other organisations, other big organisations. What is of interest for me is whether or not we're seeing particular silent voices who are leaving the organisation. And all of the exit interview surveys that come back in, they're then put into Power of BI dashboards. And so we have the high level data that is sent to divisions, and that sits in their dashboards. But in addition to that, we have all of the narrative, which is reviewed and assessed. And for example, we'll pull out if we think that there are matters that might relate to unfair treatment, to particular hotspots in the organisation where we might see a slight increase in turnover, for example. So I think we do what we can on the back of the responses, and we've tried to do what we can to position them. We do not have resource to offer an in-person exit interview all the time. We do offer it once, but beyond that, we just don't have the resource then to follow back up with every single individual. So I think we've nudged into it. We have seen some improvements, but we keep the focus on it.
Okay. And in terms of that management of absence then? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'd forgotten that bit. Yeah, so I do think that it's at a strategic level, it comes back to the health and wellbeing dashboard, and it will also come to the work that Dawn, for example, does within health and safety. Beyond that, actually, what's interesting is the short-term intermittent absence. So long-term absence is by far the largest area of absence we have, and that's related to psychological, so stress, depression, and mental fatigue. Again, I would say that that's fairly reflective of public sector organisations particularly. But the short-term absence, that's the piece where we've seen a slight increase in these dashboards. But when we've gone in and we've looked at that, what we've tended to see is that's typically related to calendar. So winter months, flu, coughs, etc. So short-term work we do in terms of monitoring it, but I guess we get back to the health and wellbeing action report, and is it doing what we need it to do, which effectively is for colleagues to feel supported, but for us to see a reduction in absence within the organisation.
Thanks. Alistair, do you want to come back? Are you content with that?
No, I'm content. You know, the absence. What I would hope to see is, particularly in that longer term absence, a reduction if all the work that we've spoken about earlier is working for the organisation. Thank you.
From my perspective, the number who continue the modified duties is a significant number, over 2,000 if you think of a workforce of 20,000. So you're roughly 10%. And some of those will be longer term modifications, others will be recovery, etc. So my question is not about analysing who they are, they'll all have their own. So it's about, do we have concerted focus in this all the time to make sure that those who are in employment, at least their availability is maximised?
Yes, so I can absolutely give assurance around modified officers. So there's been a concerted effort in this space over the last 6 months, particularly. I think, you know, certainly the Federation and ASPs would come in, hopefully, to say that you're right, that some of this will be short-term restricted, and that could be, you know, following some sort of recuperation. You're also going to see pre, and post-natal. And actually, as we get a more diverse workforce, we might expect to see increases in that space. But I think for those officers that have been on long-term modified, we now have a panel that's been set up that's chaired by ACC Johnson. And as a result of that, we've seen a number of officers that have actually been taken forward for ill health retirement now through that panel. But we have to do that sensitively. You know, these are people's lives, it's people's occupations, it's, you know, it's a sense of connection with the organisation. And if you've been in a modified post for quite some time, and now the organisation is saying, actually, we need to have a different conversation with you about whether or not we can sustain that, we need to be very, very conscious of individuals and make sure that we do it in a sensitive way.
Okay. Don't have any intimation of other questions. My proposal, like the previous one, is that we carry through with the other items under 3, and then the staff and associations and union colleagues come in at that point. Would that be acceptable? Thank you. Can we go into paper 3.2, the leadership and talent report, Katie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is one of the reports that I'm hoping to change the format of as we move forward for the committee, such that we end up with a report that looks at leadership development and also learning, training and development. So Chief Super's portfolio. So you actually start to get a holistic board report that talks to development in totality. So that's a piece that we're working to. In terms of the report that you have in front of you at the moment, this is an update from July to December of last year. It covers off a number of kind of the key initiatives and pieces that we have within the space of leadership and talent development. The key areas that I would call out at the moment is your leadership matters. We know that, you know, that there have been some challenges in relation to that and perhaps how it's perceived. But what I would say is that actually, when you look at the high level evaluation that's still ongoing of that, we are still getting good evaluation in that space. So we are due to conclude your leadership matters in June of this year. At the moment, we are currently in a phase that's about 3,800 first level leaders. And what we're seeing from that in section 2.2.4, you'll see some of the high level evaluation from the latest summits. And, you'll actually see in there that, 84% of those that responded in the rotations just gone said they actually understand what's expected of them in terms of modelling behaviours. And actually, that's the type of evaluation that should be really interested in as an organisation. The only other pieces that I'd call out are a particular programme that we have called People Manager Development Programme. And that's really about some of the more challenging aspects that our managers face. So around dealing with capability issues, dealing with health and well-being, attendance, grievance, etc. And what we're seeing from that detailed in section 2.3 is that of phase 1, where we've had just under 3,000 sergeants and equivalent staff grades, we've seen that 87% are saying that they think the training is relevant to them. But perhaps more importantly, 85% will now apply the skills and knowledge and understanding they've got from that training, and 71% feel more confident having undertaken that training. So we are seeing some really good results coming through, and that's an area that we'll continue to push. So beyond that, I'm just going to close there, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
That's true. I'm really happy. I'll open it to questions to members at the moment. One of the comments that I saw in it, I think it was paragraph 2.13, states that the My Career process, etc., could actually be holding promotion back. And so part of it is about, the level of reflection logs and the discussions. And did I pick up that only 13% of them are taking up these discussions?
Yeah, I think we've become a little bit confused about My Career as an organisation, would be my reflection. So it's almost two separate things for me. One is a promotions process, and we've just run a pilot to separate out My Career from promotions. So we've taken it out of My Career and we've got a separate form now, which is being undertaken as part of that pilot. So we'll review that, and I would hope that we'd get a positive evaluation from that. And going forward, we don't use My Career for promotions, but we need to see where we get to. The second bit then is My Career as an appraisal system, so kind of performance management for individuals. And so that for me is really about, what's the objective setting? We're getting into discussions about well-being and support. We're getting into discussions about career development. And that's a very separate piece for me. And it's a piece that I think we still need to do more on as an organisation. I think we could be tighter on appraisals, if that's the language that we want to use as an organisation, and how we use My Career in that space. So two separate things: promotions, and do we take it out of My Career? We're piloting that. And then My Career, what's the purpose and the function of it, and how do we make it work?
I think thanks for the candid response, and I think we've touched in an area that needs development and a reflection as a leadership team. So it's an area that the committee, I'm sure, would welcome further thoughts on, probably through a paper at some point, with a proposal, etc., and just reflection where we are. But I don't want to go into the detail of that just now, but it's clearly identified as something that needs our attention.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alistair?
Yeah, apologies, I was a little bit slow getting my hand up there. I was going to touch on My Career. Tom's picked that up. It just seems an incredibly low number that are actually undertaking the My Career exercise. And I know you've explained the two parts to it, but if you just think about it as the appraisal part, it's worrying to see it being so low, that one-to-one with your line managers, given their significance. So I just wanted to comment on that. And then the other thing was in relation to the evaluation. you know, programs like Your Leadership Matters. I'm not sure if it's in this paper or the next paper where it talks about the use of Kirkpatrick's model in terms of evaluation. When you get to levels 3 and 4, it's really, I mean, these are complex and difficult things to do in organisations. Levels 1 and 2 are okay. We got on with that. So just wonder, you know, that true evaluation about how that, you know, big programs like Your Leadership Matters are impacting on the organisation, changing the nature of it in terms of culture, in terms of promoting the right, you know, skills, being impactful on service delivery, etc. How are you getting on with developing that? And I know it's medium to long term, but what sort of timescales will it be before we, you know, as a board, will begin to see how that is being evaluated and whether it's truly delivering the expectations?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to come back to my career and just, you know, within the world of HR, there's a lot of debate about appraisals generally at the moment and performance curves and is it on system, is it off system, etc., etc. And I think there's an opportunity for Police Scotland to be really thinking about what's the outcome that we want from an appraisal, performance management, and then the design, if you like, of the system and the process. So that kind of outcomes-based piece, first of all. So within the people strategy, we did call out for 2025 that this was a piece of work that we'd be getting to. So we've put ourselves on the hook for this. But I think there's a really nice opportunity for us there to be thinking about what we want that to look like. And then I think on Kirkpatrick, well, this is the holy grail of evaluation, I think. Some of the metrics that we do have do start to get into level 3 and 4, you know, so when we start talking about behavioural change, you know, so particularly in Your Leadership Matters, you know, 84% of the, you know, the last 2 summits saying that they understand what's behaviourally expected them as a leader. That starts to really get in beyond levels 1 and 2. And I think on the People Manager programme, is particularly that bit about how you apply the skills and knowledge and also your confidence as a line manager to lead. So we're not there, but we're certainly beyond levels 1 and 2, and we're kind of evolving that model, you know, as we move forward. So we keep pushing on that. Some of it we won't know for 6-12 months, when perhaps you might take another reflective look back, you know, from those, you know, 71 who felt more confident at the point now, having done the development training. In 12 months' time, where does their confidence sit then? You know, how do they feel about demonstrating leadership skills, etc. So there might be a little bit of a time lag for some of that, but we're making progress.
If you allow me, Alice, I mean, I do, this paper's a discussion point, and there's a theme arising here, so we'll capture that in the whole later in the discussion. Katrina.
Thanks. Yes, I just wanted to add my interest, if you like, in your discussion is particularly around my career. I think that's really interesting. And it just to share that before I joined the board, I was involved in a Scottish Government funded employment project, which I ran for about 18 months. And to be fair, I mean, it's a slightly different, well, it's a very different context, but to be fair as well, most of the women that we were working with were kind of like in firefighting kind of mode, if you like. But what was really interesting was the common across every sector. We were working with women across every sector in Scotland, is that there was none of them actually had any kind of coaching or mentoring in terms of looking forward to how they saw the career progressing, and that was just a very notable gap. So I'm actually really interested in this and how that work kind of progresses forward. But thank you.
Thank you. It's noted. Okay, any further questions at this stage? Because I think there's a bigger conversation once colleagues from the staff associations and unions, etc., input. Can we move on, Katie, into paper 3.3, the recruitment, promotion, succession planning report?
We can. So again, this is a report that I would like to have a look at the design of it, because when I think about talent, I kind of think about in a whole system way. So there's a bit for me going forward where I think we have a report for committee that's on recruitment, because we should be really interested in whether, you know, people coming into the organisation. There's a report then on talent, and within talent, you would have in there promotion, succession planning, etc. So that kind of comes together into one piece. And then the third report I've touched upon, which is kind of around leadership development, training, etc. And then the fourth on health and wellbeing. So we'll do a little bit of reshaping, but as it stands on this report, what I would call out here at the moment is particularly some of the work that's going on in relation to the people strategy, strategic workforce plan, and policing together commitments. So I'm particularly proud of the team in terms of, you know, some of the elements around, you know, in 3.1.1, for example, we're really getting into good insight around candidate experience. And we can start to see there that, you know, of candidates for officer roles, 83%, you know, reflect a positive experience. Now, that's massive for us as an organisation in terms of word of mouth of colleagues, our brand in the market, you know, all the things we're really trying to focus on. Where we do fall down is the time to hire, and we kind of knew that this was an area for us. You know, policing is different to other organisations. It should be. We need to make sure that we're making safe appointments. But what we can see there is that even within the, you know, some of the processes that we need to follow, we can see that we are already making gains in this area. So in 3.1.1, you will have seen in May 2024, it took an average of 319 days from the start of a process to an officer joining. Now, I caveat that with some of this is driven by the candidate. So they select, for example, when to complete some aspects online. So it's, you know, and some of it is around vetting. But in January of this year, we've got that to 195 days. So where we can, we're really trying to find ways to shorten that experience, but keep us safe as an organisation. I would also call out at 3.1.2 the application rates. That gives some insight into the level of applications that the team are dealing with. And also then we then in 3.2 start to talk about promotions, which we've touched upon in previous reports. But again, it's really looking to try and find a way how we bring this together so that we're talking about talent, promotions, career opportunities, etc. in one space. The last thing I'd say is that in Appendix A, you'll see audit and inspection recommendations that relate to this space of work. And in Appendix B, you'll see activity that's been aligned to strategic commitments that we've made and where we're making progress in some of those areas. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any further questions in that just now? Paul?
Yeah, I'm looking at 3.22 and reading across to 3.23, the equality, diversity and inclusion. So I'm interested in we've got 645 officers promoted, and I'm interested in the makeup of officers being promoted. Also, I mean, firstly, can I get an explanation for the graph, the assessment outcomes by gender? So if we could get an explanation of that, because what is that? Is that percentage of those that have applied are applicants, or is that, you know, because male and female don't add up to 50%? Am I reading it wrongly?
Yes, so it's an overall percentage of applicants. What I would say is that obviously where we present data, that's, you know, we need the data input, if you like, from candidates in order to pull it.
Yeah.
What our data does show us at 3.1.3, which is kind of the failure rate, is that we have a lower success rate for Black, minority, ethnic and disabled candidates. So that's in 2023, 2024. What I would say is that what we're doing in that is to really try and understand through our positive action team is what sits underneath that. And actually, when we look at the different parts of the process, we will look at everything from shortlisting through to medicals, through to vetting, etc. we can see perhaps different points in the process where we might see numbers decrease by particular characteristics. And then that's the area. So for example, so I feel like I'm jumping around, but in one of the appendix, we talked specifically about some of the work that we've been doing with an external medical practitioner who's been looking at, so for example, how we review candidates who are taking antidepressants,
right?
How we look at hearing tests, how we look at eyesight tests, etc. So we've been working with an external medical practitioner for about 10 months now and asking him to do an independent assessment of A, what we do at the moment, but B, recommendations going forward. And then that really starts to tie into particular parts where we might see a greater decline in a particular step of the process.
Thanks, Katie. That's really interesting because I'm reading this sentence underneath that chart, which says data-related predictive characteristics can be more variable due to vast differences in group size, but no issues of concern were noted from analysis of this data. That is, to me, tells me everything in the garden's rosy, and that does not match what you've just told me.
So what I would say is there's always improvements to be made. We never stand still in recruitment.
Yeah.
So even thinking about antidepressants, you know, there's a very topical situation. I think I read a report that said, is it 1 in 5 of the Scottish population are potentially taking medication at this point in time? Well, we have to respond to that in terms of our recruitment and our practices. So do our current practices still reflect societal changes, etc.? So definitely we're tight in terms of reviewing that process, but what we're saying is we always push forward and we always question ourselves and look for improvements.
So is there more data that we can have that in a consumable fashion as a committee that will maybe flesh this out and give us some assurance rather than reassurance that there are no issues of concern?
Yes, we can provide that. And as I say, as we move towards the summer, I'd like a separate report on recruitment, and then we have promotions sitting within a talent report. So we can definitely do more of a deep dive on that.
And is there data about homegrown officers, for want of a better description, people that are coming into Tullyallen and their progress through the promotional system? I'm conscious we do poach an awful lot of officers from other services, which is a good thing, but also I'd be concerned if there were glass ceilings for people that we're producing ourselves.
We have a huge amount of data on that.
Good.
Yes, we do.
I don't want it all.
I think in the summer we did a deep dive on some of the promotional data. I'd need to dig out the report, but certainly as we work towards our kind of annual reports for the summer, we would present a lot more data.
Yeah. I mean, just for the record, I don't want glass ceilings for anybody of any characteristic at all. I want good people feeling that they're able to, what's the word, climb up the managerial ladder as best as they can, or the promotional ladder as best they can. So, yeah, thanks for that, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Alistair.
Hi, Katie. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks again for the report. There's a lot in it, and I do support your change of direction. It'll be helpful. I've got 2 questions. The first one is in relation to the use or non-use at times of advertising campaigns. You know, a huge amount. I mean, that's going to be hugely influential on who applies. And I know you've got lots of other work going on, like outreach, etc. But I just wondered what your thinking behind all that is and your approach. And then the second one, really, question I have is as a result of some of the answers. I mean, society is changing. You know, you give an example there of the use or non-use of antidepressants, etc. So making changes to things like, you know, the medical requirements to join. When we make changes, do we put in place things like longitudinal studies, you know, so we see the impact of this over time, over a policing career? So those are my 2 questions.
Yeah, thank you. So on the campaigns, The latest time that we switched them off was when we were pausing recruitment for officers as a result of budget. So we'll kind of flex depending upon attrition and requirements to kind of build the pipeline, if you like. More broadly than that, we had an external individual who undertook an assessment of our recruitment last year. And actually, that was more for me around our brand as an organisation, where we sit in the market, how candidates perceive us, thinking about multi-generational workforces, etc. And that's everything from the images we use to how you bring in officers, kind of day in the life of, to life for people. And I don't know if anybody's heard on particular radio stations at the moment, but we're doing a huge amount of advertising under the banner of a job like no other. And actually that for us then is starting to look at where we're getting candidates from, what are their life experiences, what professions have they joined us from, and trying to help candidates translate experience that they have into a policing world where perhaps they themselves wouldn't make that. So one of the examples is in C3, and we've got a big advertising campaign at the moment that draws upon people from different work experience, but how they can apply it within a C3 setting. So I think regardless in some ways of whether or not we're aggressively advertising because of numbers, we should always have a brand presence. And I think that's really important for us. So we kind of keep that going. Then I think more broadly, yes, we absolutely will undertake longitudinal studies. We need to be very, very clear that any decisions we make are the right decisions. We will also make sure that we do EQHRAs, and also that, if there's a policy implication, again, we go through due consultation on that. So absolutely, yeah, I can give assurance there.
Well, thank you for both those responses. Appreciate it.
From myself in relation to the promotion and succession planning, this relates back to the promotion dashboard. If you looked at the distribution of ready now, a much higher proportion of superintendent ranks were ready now for promotion than, for instance, inspectors and chief inspectors. And there's a much higher use of active and temporary roles there as well. And so there's always a risk that the closer you are to the decision maker, the more difficult it is for the decision maker to say you're not ready. And so the superintendent's closer to the decision maker, the inspector's much further away, and then you get out to sergeant, etc. It becomes much more ruthless, that decision, or considered. So is there something happening there in the inspecting ranks, that there's a difference in ready now compared to the superintendent ranks as a proportion?
I suspect some of my colleagues from the Federation and ASPs are going to be far more equipped, potentially with their insight, to answer this. I do think that there's no doubt pension remedy had an impact, and actually that sudden turnover of officers left gaps in succession, and therefore to some extent we are almost kind of a little bit on the back foot of trying to fulfill some of those gaps. I also think that when we switch off the pipeline, for example, for constable recruitment, where when we had kind of a budget challenge, that's one way of managing your budget. But what that also means then is that when you then increase the recruitment, you have a very large proportion of officers who have a short tenure in rank. And so in some ways, you're kind of into this catch-up piece, I think, within ranks. As I say, I suspect the Federation and ASPs chair will have a view on that.
Yeah, I'll be coming to him shortly. But it's just recognising that there is difference in there in the dashboard. Okay, as I was going through the papers under section 3, can I come to staff associations and union colleagues for any comments that you want to make at this time, rather than questions, I suppose? David, you put your hand up first, then we'll go to Brian.
Thanks, Chair. Just to take us back briefly to the appraisal system. I forget what it's called now. It's escaped me.
Career.
My career, that's the one. Thanks, Tom. You know, just to reflect on that, the comments that we have, and we have had for essentially all the appraisal systems when we go even back to legacy forces, is how little it really does for staff. And I think Katie mentioned there, you know, looking into that about where those actual trajectories are for staff. It's at this time of year where I'm getting more messages from members that say why they have to take part in this. Is this obligatory? Can I opt out of this? I've copied and pasted what I've been told to put in it. We get that sort of language. So, you know, a lot of people put a lot of good work into that. But again, you know, if you've not got the avenues to take staff along and the promotion to give them, then they do fall out from the system, and they don't. And you can see there it's borne out in the stats that they don't apply, they don't put into it, and they don't participate in it.
I recognise that, David, and obviously it's a focus that we're going to have, but it's the importance of recognising that it's not just about promotion the system and how do we communicate that. But thanks. Brian?
Yes, thanks, Chair. If we go back to the beginning, we are obviously very appreciative of the workforce dashboard. Provides a significant amount of information for us on a page, and it's good to see. To reassure Mr. Eady, yes, officer safety in card is a concern for the SPF, and I constantly harangue, if that's the right word, the DCC in those matters. And I'm glad to update the last use of force monitoring group. That's over 90% plus who have got their training back in ticket, which impacts obviously operational demand in the front line. Regarding the annual appraisal systems we're talking about, this is something we've been raising for a number of years because it impacts on performance regulations. So if we don't have an annual appraisal system, then we can't implement those regulations to their best value. So that results in things going down the conduct route, which could in fact be dealt with by performance regulations. So that's something that I know that Katie and I have discussed before in the past about how do we introduce this annual appraisal system to make sure that people feel valued and they have a direction to actually enhance their career. And then the final thing about promotion is, from an SPF perspective, it's raising expectations to all that there is a potential to be promoted, when I'm quite sure Mr. Halpin and Mr. Hay, you recognise in your former careers it's only 15% can actually get promoted out of the 100%, and that's the hard reality of it all. So yes, you can go through the whole process, and you can go through it numerous times, but you will not be successful. There's no guarantee of success, and it's managing that expectation. Thank you, Chair.
All very valid, Brian, thanks. Rob?
Thanks very much, Chair. First things probably just, you're right to call out that increase in modified and therefore not fully deployable officers when you look through those statistics. That's something that is a real strategic challenge for the service, and Katie's right when she talks about the volume of activity that's going in to address that. However, we do see those trends to continue upwards, and that's a really difficult point. You know, even while we're managing to have panels to address them, I guess the question would be, is the rate at which we're able to address them enough to actually help halt or change that trend line? So it's definitely one to watch for the future. Similar to Brian's comments, firstly around about appraisal, the My Career system as it currently stands is probably insufficient as an appraisal system. It explicitly doesn't allow for example, challenging negative performance notes to be added in respect to the evidence notes. So where, unless the system is enabling those sometimes difficult conversations, that the service is lacking in that tool to intervene and supportively and helpfully help to people to increase their performance in those kind of areas. And you asked the question around about that readiness, which seems to show much higher at those going for superintendent ranks. Katie's right. Obviously, the turnover at superintendent level has been really significant over the last couple of years. Enabled, I would say, by the change to the pension regs, not necessarily caused by it, but certainly enabled by it. That increases demand to fill those gaps that the service has, and a desire to pull individuals through more quickly. What we've seen in the last 2 promotion processes, however, is that doesn't necessarily translate into readiness to be promoted. And the numbers in the last 2 promotion processes have not matched the number of vacancies, which means that we're currently sitting with some really high numbers of temporary and acting superintendents at around about 30%, which in and of itself, with an inexperienced workforce, creates a whole myriad of challenges in that space. So yeah, we're keen to continue to work with Katie and her team around about that, but really content that we've got good engagement on it.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that final point there, Rob. That's so important. I think my message to all staff associations, yourself, David, in terms of staff colleagues, the importance of my career and my own leadership, etc., is absolutely core to the work of this group going forward. The past, I know it has been, but and the conversations that's been contributed to by the Director of People and others emphasises that including some of the concerns that are shared across us all, and that it's about working to get something that actually the workforce and the staff survey, etc., reflect that they feel it's meaningful going forward. And it was encouraging to hear the Federation's input into this, the amount of work going into it and trying to be fair and all the rest of it that's there. Some of these are just that's the reality of managing such a large workforce through a very complex system and context in terms of external influences, etc. So thanks to everyone for their contributions in that, Bill. And we've got this sort of reset, if we want to call that, but it's more about reporting for the committee. We'll be combining some of these reports to make sure that data is joined up across the agendas as well. So it'll be interesting to, as we go through that journey together in reporting it. Can I move then to item 4, the health and safety section of the public session? Dawn McLean, Health and Safety Manager for Police Scotland, you've got the Q3 report for health and safety. Right, Dawn?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the paper as read, but I'll point out a few highlights. So there was an ask from the members at the November meeting last year to look at the increase in RIDDOR non-assault and if there were any significant trends there. As you can see within slides 5 and 6, despite the number rising, there's little to differentiate really between the quarters, apart from highlighting that there was an increase in injuries caused during OST, officer safety training. However, I probably want to caveat that with the fact that we have had more training sessions recently in order to get the number of officers out of card back in tickets. So that is potentially why there was an increase in that. Slide 8 shows the reporting rate has come down again, which again is disappointing, and probably going back to Katie's point in relation to some of the work relating to the survey. We really do want to continue to raise the awareness in how effective reporting can be when it comes to continuous improvement. We've seen that we've got evidence to support that in relation to some of the changes that we've done in relation to training, etc. So we will continue to do some work on that, and that will be reflective of the work plan as well going forward into 25-26. Slide 9 continues to identify that during arrest and custody has been the highest for accidents and near misses. A deeper dive into those looked at the fact that there was 80% of those are caused by struggle. So we will continue to support officers and staff in that area to see where we can help try to bring that number down by some significant way if we can. Also, just to highlight some of the areas where we've got some concerns and updates at the moment. So Balloony Field in Dundee has a training block which is used significantly by operational safety training, but that has had to be closed due to water ingress during the recent storms, and that has significantly impacted the rack, which we already were aware of in that building. There is a safe system being carried out at the moment. That building is not to be used. It is locked down at the moment, and estates are working with those affected to help support them where they can to get items that need to be retrieved. But as I say, it's only where there is an absolute needs must, and we're continuing to look into that building and see where we can get any progress made, whether or not it's something that we can do to make it operational again, or whether we need to look elsewhere for support there. Just other pieces to highlight as well in terms of the fire safety. So we've made some significant differences in terms of the compliance rates with the training. There is a bit of disparity at the moment due to the fact that we've changed it. So there is a combination now of the two modules. So hopefully further into the year, we'll see that improvement even further. We've also got the new strategy in place for how we deal with fire risk assessment actions. This will start to go ahead as of the start of April, where we will get a group coming together with the states, with ourselves, and try to get those actions implemented and completed where possible in a much timelier fashion than has been happening so far. Other training, and this again will probably come back to some of the work that Katie and her team are doing. We're looking at where we can perhaps have an input into the People Managers Development Programme. I know that there are certain key pillars in there, and what they do is they have spotlight sessions. I've been in conversations with colleagues in L&T about how we could perhaps get an input there, and also into the new leadership development programme as well. I think that will be a really welcome input, and it would also help to assist us in reaching out to leaders to say how they have responsibility for health and safety and what that looks like. And really welcome as well. We've been invited to give an input beginning of March and throughout the March into next year, into the operational command training. My team sit on these operational meetings at all the levels, so we can now give an insight into the matters that need to be considered, including those matters not just of safety but also of welfare. So we really welcome the opportunity to have an input at operational command level training. The other thing I just wanted to highlight as well, we do continue to liaise with Your Safety Matters in relation to the assaults. And again, what I would say is that just to say that we do encourage that reporting to take place. It does make a difference when we have that information, and particularly to highlight any near miss activity so that we could get in there prior to any events taking place. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you. Thanks for that, Dawn. We'll take questions to you. I want to acknowledge that I put on the message to everyone. I neglected paper 3.4. They're so eager to get through in the timetable, and I'll come back to Chief Superintendent Gibson following this discussion. So my apologies about that. Coming back to Dawn's report. Immediate questions from board members, please. Alistair Hay.
Hi, Dawn. thank you for your report. Just to restate, you know, about assaults on police officers and police staff, just how unacceptable it is, and yet, you know, you draw it out or you emphasise it in the report. I was going to ask a question on the driver training, you know, and we'll come back to that. But it's one of the areas where I think in your report there's 34 injuries and 3 riddle ones that come out. So again, it's just to draw this, you know, the importance of this ongoing monitoring. And I think you also mentioned about how you know, this information is linked into the decision making within the organisation. So a valuable report. I'm also going to show my own lack of knowledge here. Slide 1D, reporting monitoring, assault reporting, Q3. I'm not quite understanding what that's telling us. So if I take Edinburgh as an example, and the reporting rate is now 70.5, it was 110.2, so there's a change of 39.7. What's that actually telling us?
Thank you, Alistair. I'll come back to the driver training in a second, just to emphasise that. But to come to the point that you make there about Edinburgh, what that's telling us is that there is a disparity between the actual reporting rate to between ourselves and Your Safety Matters. So the crime reporting is different to what our reporting is. So again, what we do is with all our divisions, we take this to the local committees and we drive this forward as almost like a league table. And it does really give that sort of very quick reflection of where the leaders in those divisions need to step up and encourage that reporting more. Like I say, we do work really closely with our divisions, and I do know that when they are on the lower side, they come to me and ask the questions, so they do take note. In terms of your questions in relation to the driver training, we've actually now established that we do have areas where we do need to improve. So we've added this to the risk register, the organisational risk register. And I know that perhaps Chief Super Gibson might want to come in on that in his paper, but not just on the training side, but also just reflective of any information that we receive through accidents and incidents, and how we come together and sort of take a holistic approach to that.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take that report and note it. And as we say, its relationship to health and well-being is so critical. We will be looking how we report that in a more integrated way going forward. So thank you for that. Can we go back into item 3.4 just now before we come to our colleagues' contribution from associations and unions, etc. Chief Superintendent Gibson.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. You'll have a paper 3.4, which effectively I've detailed 9 elements of my business area, learning, training and development, and I've picked out 9 different items to update you on, which I think are many of which have been discussed at the committee before, and obviously members will be familiar with some of the content of them. In terms of kind of some introductory comments, and I'll break for questions very quickly. The first element talks about obviously our 3-year learning and development plan, and gives members an indication as to what lies ahead over the next 3 years in terms of our focus. Opurial at section 2 talks about a recent approval that I've received for our function to start looking at bringing more training under one umbrella in the organisation. We have a number of different bits of training delivered across different functions, and we're keen for consistency and the benefits that are mentioned in the paper to bring them under one umbrella. So we're working together with business areas at the moment on an implementation plan for that. Item 3 on my paper talks about prioritisation and planning, and one of the challenges that we've rehearsed at the committee before is There's a huge amount of training that the organisation undertakes, much of that to support operational delivery of service, and we're really keen to prioritise that in amongst a very busy work calendar clearly across the organisation. It also talks about the launch of the training compliance dashboard, which again my team have now pushed out to every sergeant and staff equivalent line manager across the organisation, so they can now scrutinise the completion of training on a team and individual basis, which is a really good and positive step forward, I would suggest. Item 4 talks about driver training, and I think Alistair, was maybe going to come in with a question regarding that. Driver training, we've discussed at the committee before, and it is an area of challenge for me, but one I know that members have a particular interest in as we try to meet the demands of the organisation with what is a very specialist skill set to be trained in. Item 5 talks about equality, diversity and inclusion training, and I've given a very brief update on our face-to-face anti-racism training, which we're currently rolling out across the organisation, obviously to every member of the organisation, both officers and staff, as well as a quick update on our e-learning package, which was the precursor to that. Item 6 talks about OST, operational safety training, and members have mentioned that obviously in the previous item. The current statistical compliance level is 96% in the organisation, and again we've made significant moves forward to get the organisation as compliant as possible in terms of operational safety training. I'd probably draw out 6.4 as a particular item of note. We are doing a test of change right now in Inverclyde to see, looking at the shift changeover period, we can give bite-sized OST refreshers to officers during that shift changeover. We've already seen a potential 19% drop in injuries through assault in Inverclyde, so it's very promising. It'll be subject to full, obviously, analysis and evaluation, but again, that could be something that we pull out for distribution across the organisation. 7 covers probationer training and some commentary around about the recent course which passed out, and obviously our move to deliver both at Tullyallen and Jackton. And then lastly, Chair, you'll be well familiar with our international offering, but again, I've pulled out a number of what I would suggest are highlights in terms of the work we do internationally. And of note, in terms of 8.1, we currently have 12 officers from Malawi and Zambia at Tullyallen doing an investigatory course right now. This is day 2 for them. And then second and last point will be a Global Policing and Innovation Exchange Board. DCC Spears chairs that board, and again, that leadership programme took place very successfully at Tullyallen. And then lastly, the quality assurance, again, some good news I would suggest in terms of inspection activity which has taken place regarding our role as a credit rating body. And obviously we're one of only 9 organisations in the further and higher education sector who have that status, which again is a real feather for the organisation's cap. And then I'll pause there, Chair, for questions.
Thanks, Alan. Offer it for questions. Alistair here.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Really fulsome report. Really appreciate it. Clearly, a huge amount going on. Just quick comment in relation to 5.1, the anti-racism training, and obviously, you know, the comments of the Chief Constable and the previous Chief Constable about, you know, striving to be actively anti-racist and anti-discriminatory. You know, it's good to see that recognised in here. And just to comment that, you know, very recently in the last fortnight, the SPA board has actually had its first initial anti-racism training as well. So a lot going on in that field. And that's very welcome. Yes, I'm going to ask a question around the driver training. You know, I don't think we can overstate the challenges in it. I think you draw a lot of those out within your report. But there seems to be a big challenge there around recruiting driving instructors with the right skills, and you've started that process up. So just wondering what activities are taking place to increase the number of driving instructors up to the agreed number. Are those instructors are they permanent in the organisation once they've been recruited? And with the 7 that have been approved, what's your sense in terms of will that be sufficient given the amount of demand that you highlight within the report?
Thanks, Alistair. Yeah, to answer those questions, the 7 are not, they're 18-month contracts effectively that have been brought into the organisation to help us deal with the challenges and the various different kind of capacity challenges that we face. It has been challenging. I had sought to get advanced driving instructors, and I thought that myself and colleagues thought that would be relatively straightforward, but actually going to market on multiple occasions has failed to get us that. So what we have got is staff that we can and are upskilling to deliver the standard response driving course. And again, that is an area of high demand, so that is welcome, but it does not eat into the advanced driver challenges. That said, what I am doing is remodelling the business area so that we can hopefully reach some capacity to do more advanced driver training. As you can see from the report, one of the challenges are we are now looking to advanced driver train every ARV officer in Scotland. Yeah. That will take us time, and again, we're working through how we can do that differently. The next portion of my approach to this will be looking to see if I can readjust my business modelling in any way to increase the headcount of instructors in that space. It's a very specialised area of business, as everybody will appreciate. So we are at the mercy of what the market can provide. We can upskill them, but that takes time. And obviously, on occasion, not every day that we upskill passes the challenges of the instructor's course. So it's a fairly wicked problem, to be honest, but one that we're facing into. Because again, we really need to get these different capacity challenges down to a more manageable level. But again, we're still delivering to a high standard to large numbers across the organisation. We do it in multiple locations, again, trying to be flexible to make sure we're taking the training out to the areas that need it most. So hopefully I've covered your points, Alistair. Please prompt me if I've missed anything.
No, you've covered my points. I've got a couple of follow-ups, but I see DCC Spears as wanting to come in. I don't know if it's in support of your responses, Alan.
It is actually related, so thanks for letting me do that. I mean, I think as I reflect on driver training, and Tom Halpin and I have both been in and around policing for a long number of years. If you go back 30 years in policing, you didn't automatically get a driving course. So there's always been a period where it might take you 4 or 5 years to get a driving course. So there is something about us maybe defining people who are waiting to be trained in driving is not necessarily a backlog, because fast forward another 25 years, we will still have people waiting to be trained in driving. I think the important point that I would want to get across is, and this has been covered a little bit in the media, there is no adverse impact on how we deliver a service to communities in Scotland just now as a consequence of people waiting to get a driving course. We have more than a sufficiency of officers trained to different standards of driving that allows us to deliver an effective service. And some of the media reporting would perhaps suggest that we've got challenges in this space. So I just kind of really wanted to, in the public setting, offer a bit of reassurance about the service that we are able to deliver across the communities of Scotland.
Chair, are you okay if I come back in?
Alistair, you carry on just now, and no doubt we'll return to this point once the Federation have had their input as well. So there you go.
Yeah. DCC coming in with that reassurance, that's kind of answered some of my follow-up questions that I had. I think that's a really important point to make. And you know, Alan, Chief Super, you mentioned about the work you're doing about remodelling and different approaches and all of that. Because I think you've framed the challenge really well. You've sought solutions and you're looking to improve upon those. And all I would say now is I look forward to seeing those solutions coming forward, and certainly would be very supportive of the approach that you're taking, and appreciate the DCC's reassurance.
Thanks for that, Alistair. Is there any other questions at this point? Chief Superintendent, from my own perspective, our link in relationship to the College of Policing for UK level training, could you give us an insight into that, its availability to our staff, etc.?
Of course, Chair. You mean in general terms? Is it like to drive?
Yeah, general terms. Well, for instance, I mean, clearly we know in that talent stream going towards chief officer rank is integrated there anyway. But I mean, there was historical positions of specialist training, you know, disaster victim identification, senior investigator training, all these sort of things. It's just make sure that that area is covered as well.
No, of course, yeah, we have a strong relationship, as you would imagine, with the College of Police, and there are a range of their products that we deliver within Scotland, such as in the firearms and public order space, but also, as you mentioned, specialist products in the crime space and surveillance training and the like. We also we have regular liaison meetings with the College of Policing to discuss new approaches to different products and how we're going to take things forward. In fact, I had a team down south last week meeting with directors of the College of Policing again, just to kind of look at where our opportunities to work together are, because again, we're dealing with many of the same challenges. So we're currently looking at, for example, crime training, and we're looking at what's happening down south and how we could potentially replicate or indeed work closer together with the College of Policing, specifically in the crime training space, given some of the challenges that we face in that, and trying to make sure that we're obviously at the forefront of thinking. So yeah, the relationship is strong, range of products delivered. It probably increases every year, to be honest. Products that we deliver either under license or in tandem with the College of Policing, but again, keen to work with them because again, they open up a range of different expertise and I guess thinking from UK policing wider than just ourselves, which has always been helpful.
So the key assurance for this committee would be in terms of interoperability. Are we still able to give that assurance?
Yes, I mean there are specific roles and functions which are very much interoperable. You know, we do deviate on certain different products. We have certain different approaches to different things, but with certain national functions and assets, such as, you know, armed policing, the delivery of training in Scotland is exactly the same as the delivery of training as it will be in West Midlands or down in any of the English or Welsh forces, again, for that interoperability phase. Same with things like surveillance training and the like, public order training. There's specific linkages to the College of Policing to make sure the products align and we can operate up and down across the UK as well.
Thanks, Alan. Take comfort from that. Okay, so in terms of the two papers, the Learning, Training, Development report, which comes twice a year, and Dawn's report on health and safety, can I offer out for comment from our colleagues now? Brian Jones from the Federation.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I always thank Chief Superintendent Gibson for his open and transparent reflection on the issues and challenges regarding driver training. There are significant concerns that we have as a staff association. We constantly raise that with the force. And so I'm in regular dialogue with the DCC regarding that. Obviously, there's been a change in legislation, which causes additional concerns for us with the police prescribed driving regulations, putting different onuses on the level of training provided for different standards of driver. But we appreciate the open and transparency we've now got from Chief Superintendent Gibson about what the actual numbers are in the organisation. So we're not having to have that constant conversation between ourselves and the force about what is the actual number, because we've got it in black and white now. So we appreciate that. But that's obviously something we'll continue to look at across the spectrum, because there is a significant number of officers in specialist roles who require additional training, which could impact on the operational delivery of the organisation. So we appreciate that. Also appreciate all the work that Chief Superintendent Gibson talked about for officer safety training, because that is a significant push to get the number of officers back again above the 80% that we're talking about previously, up to 96%. And from a health and safety perspective, I work closely with Dawn, liaising with on a regular basis from a staff association. So if we have concerns about health and safety, we can go to the health and safety manager and her assistant manager and speak on a regular basis to whatever those concerns will be. And if we do have any concerns, we will carry out a health and safety inspection. And we've carried out a couple of those, and we've currently got activity just now in road policing, which we'll report to the force hopefully in the beginning of May.
That's appreciated, Brian. Rob?
Yeah, just similarly very supportive of the work that Alan's outlined there. You know, a really positive picture in many aspects. And I guess, you highlighted the unique status of the Scottish Police College in terms of its educational credentials. It's just to say to the service and indeed the authority, to be ambitious around about how that applies. We talked about the College of Policing, but in fact, many of the areas Alan's highlighted, Police Scotland are certainly at the forefront and arguably UK leading in terms of some of the training, the current pilot around about bite-sized OST work and the impact that has on training, would be just one of those. Some of the really good international stuff that Alan has highlighted as well. So making sure that we exploit that status to the fullest, and aren't afraid to move into a space where we're keen to be seen as UK leading in terms of our offer, and ultimately what that enables on the ground for staff and the public to enjoy in terms of an improved service.
Thanks, Rob. And can I go now to David Malcolm?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to raise a matter on the health and safety report. I know you'd touched on sort of matters of concern at the moment. Dawn, it was just to raise an observation that I'm aware that there's a concern over the Mark Enhancement Lab at the Scottish Police. The SPA Forensic Services, which has gone to a gold group. I don't know if that's worth providing comment on, Chair.
I'm clear that we would expect a report if there was something that had an issue in terms of governance, in terms of the operational management of it. I'm sure in the management of the lab, but I see Vicky's put her hands up. So she's clearly content to give some comment on it.
Great, thanks, Chair. Just to say, yes, that an issue has been raised at one of our sites. It's quite complex and involving estates, health and safety and other partners. So the management have full control of that and have taken the necessary immediate actions. We've been liaising directly with our trade union colleagues. So it's at very early stages, but it's very much in hand. Thank you.
What site is it?
It's the Scottish Crime Campus.
Scottish Crime Campus. Thanks, David. Thanks for raising it, but I'm conscious that if there's something coming out of that investigation, David, or incident, then that will be picked up through the health and safety report. Is that okay with you? Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So there's a number of issues in that. I can just give my own endorsement as well of the international work being led by Police Scotland, demonstrated its willingness to be a global citizen and providing training and support to other areas through both the UK government and the Scottish government. And the one in particular was mentioned today was the key work and support and the investigation of crime involving violence against women and girls in Malawi and Zambia, and sharing that knowledge and expertise here. Apart from that professional exchange, I'm sure these are life events for the people who are involved in that. Travelling to Scotland to receive that, which means that they can be exposed to more experts here than you could if you sent one individual there. So, I mean, that willingness to work flexible like that is to be absolutely commended. And so, just like the wider committee, and if there's public observation of this, that to be noted. We've got the paper 5 now is the sharing with the committee the annual review of committee effectiveness. Vanessa Ewing from Scottish Police Authority should be on the call. Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, please, on you go.
Excellent. I'll keep my comments brief, but the committee effectiveness process is an important role to play just in supporting the authority's commitment to continuous improvement and improvement in our governance arrangements. So the committee will be aware that all of our committees undertake this annual self-assessment process, and the purpose is to consider how you are performing against your terms of reference. In turn, that informs both committee and members' development. the work plans and the certificate of assurance process, which each committee must submit to ARAC as part of its annual reporting and accounts process. You'll note from the paper that we have enhanced this year's process. We've invited the stakeholders, who are all listed at paragraph 1.2, to offer their assessment and views. Overall, the results from members of the committee are positive, with one area related to the volume of papers and the late submission of papers suggested where improvements could be taken forward. In terms of stakeholders, we received 3 responses in total, 2 of which were specific to the People Committee. Feedback was mixed, as set out in section 4 of the report. For example, both stakeholders agreed that the meetings were effectively managed and the committee's work enhanced transparency and accountability in policing. However, both also felt that they were unsure about the committee's support for policing. Feedback also suggests that there is more work to be done to ensure visibility and understanding of the committee's priorities and alignment with its work plan. So the purpose, Chair, is for committee members to are asked to discuss the report, the results, and consider areas for improvement, and confirm whether or not you're satisfied that the committee has discharged its terms of reference for this period. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. Can I offer it for initial comment to our board colleagues? Paul, lead it.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Firstly, the stakeholder survey findings. How many responses did we get from stakeholders? Was it, and how many did we send it out to?
So the stakeholders are all listed at paragraph 1.2.
Yeah,
I haven't added that up. Sorry, you're testing my
No, it's okay.
We got 3 responses from stakeholders in total, but actually 2 of which only opted to provide comment on the People Committee. So there was only 2 stakeholders on that list who responded, and it was an anonymous response. We didn't ask for people to give us their details.
Yeah, but that's 2 responding to the whole effectiveness thing across the whole board.
No, so that's 2. There's 3 in total. We had 3 stakeholders on that list responded, but for the People Committee, of those 3, only 2 of the stakeholders chose to comment on the People Committee.
I'm slightly confused. What did the third comment on? If it wasn't the People Committee, this is the People Committee's effectiveness thing that was sent out.
Yes, but it was actually one single survey that went out to all members, and they selected which committee they attended. So they may attend more than one committee.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. So yeah, okay. Yes. So okay, the next query or observation I've got is that, the volume of papers is something that's been fingered, and there's 1 or 2 things committees have that. It's just to throw up. I don't think there's any question about the timing of meetings, because one of the issues with volumes of papers is when you get maybe, for some committees, 500 pages of papers, and you've got 2 committee meetings that week. And late papers are particularly challenging in those circumstances, because you're having to sort of focus hard to try and get through 400 or 500 pages sometimes for another committee, and then something comes in off left field that should have come in a week before. So it's just to make that observation. I don't think that's picked up in any of the questions and the effectiveness thing, the timing of these, but that can be challenging. For example, we've got people today, and in a couple of days we have complaints and conduct, and you never know quite how many pages of papers are going to come in and how much volume there is, but sometimes there's audit, and that can be huge as well. So it's just to flag that up as an issue.
Yeah. So the ability to manage papers is a consistent issue across all committees, and Vanessa certainly alert to that. It doesn't answer your question because it's a reality of where we are at the moment, but it's noted. Thanks for that, Paul. Alistair?
Yeah, I do think that the committee has discharged, excuse me, has discharged its responsibility. I know, and has discharged its responsibilities this year, but that doesn't mean to say there's any room for complacency. And I think the value that a survey such as this adds is immense. And I think for me, the thing that this came across is and it's understandable, there's a golden thread almost throughout all the papers. There's a lot of overlap in these things. And I think the comments that Katie's made about how she wants to restructure this and present it, I think that will aid the committee's effectiveness going forward. And I would also back up Paul's comment. You know, there is a lot of papers to read, and if they do come along late, and I appreciate the workloads within Police Scotland and the wider SPA, but if they do come along late, it does make it much more difficult to give them the attention and the scrutiny that they absolutely require.
Thanks for that, Alistair. Katrina?
Yes, I just, you know, there's nothing been said that I would disagree with. I do agree entirely with that. The volume of papers is such, but I mean, I think on the whole, we try and manage that through, you know, sharing the load, if you like, and then we have these conversations where we can pick up on questions and offer supplementaries and all the rest of it. I'm quite concerned with two things. I'm concerned with the low number of stakeholders who've responded, which seems just quite concerned that, you know, and also the two that did respond specifically about the People Committee said that the committee wasn't effective in supporting policing, and that, and maybe I'm being oversensitive to criticism, but you know, that makes me feel quite uncomfortable actually, because I think, well, it's not the fault of the survey because the survey had a particular purpose, but I would love then to have a follow-up and say, well, what is it else that you think we should be doing if you think we're not being effective? But yeah.
Yeah, I suppose like all these things, we always focus on the things that is not absolutely praising, and we can't overstate the feedback. There's a lot of business goes through this committee, which means there's a lot of papers, and the bit that I take comfort from. So I recognise the issue about papers, and I think that's always been an issue and always will be. It's how we manage that in terms of timeliness, etc., and briefings. But one thing that's a real indicator is that we never have a problem with professionals attending the committee to speak to their paper, and that level of engagement with the committee is a strong indicator of its relevance and effectiveness in the overall organisation. And the work that's ongoing with Katie and through DCC Spears function as well, in terms of reviewing how we report, the work that John McLean's doing and Katie's team, and looking at the tempo of reports, of combining reports, shows that it is a live and current consideration. So I think we should take comfort from that and recognise that ultimately we have fed back that the committee is effective, and that's the message that I take from it. Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add one thing in relation to Katrina's concern around the number of stakeholders who chose to feedback. We did have stakeholders who would respond to our request to say either they didn't feel it was appropriate or they didn't feel it was necessary, and they preferred the regular and informal channels that they have directly with officials. So I wouldn't perceive a low number of response rates to an annual survey to be an indicator that they don't feel like they're heard. That was the opposite of the responses we got from people who said, I'm going to choose not to respond to this because I feel like we can inform and give input on a regular basis.
That's great. Thanks, Vanessa. In terms of that committee effectiveness report, can I ask our colleagues from staff associations, do you have any comments you wish to make? It's not compulsory. Well, thanks very much. I'm going to draw this public session to conclusion, but before I do, today is Katrina Stewart's last public meeting of the People Committee, and it's important as her term of office and appointment to the board comes to a conclusion. So I want to take the opportunity on behalf of the committee. No doubt thanks will be expressed to the board as well. But Katrina, for your contribution to the Works Committee, I've personally taken a lot. You've brought a perspective to it. You've been appropriately pushing us in the areas, particularly in the areas of neurodiversity. You're a champion in public life, you're a champion in the board and in this committee. And given that it's a people committee, there's no more important place for you to be a champion for that. But actually, you champion the whole range of inclusion, diversity, and that's to be commended. And I certainly find your openness in your conversations very, very constructive and been a great contribution and support to myself as a board member. So your experience and insight is valuable as all, and we wish you all the best for the future, Katrina, and thanks for everything you've done to support us.
Thank you so much. I hugely appreciate that. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'm not leaving. I'm only leaving because of personal issues, as opposed to not wanting to do the work anymore. It's been a huge privilege, a genuine privilege, and a genuine opportunity. And I'm proud to be seen as a champion for disability and neurodiversity. I hope I've brought some other things. My research background and so on as well. But thank you, Tom. I won't go on. I just want to say how much I appreciate your words. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure the name Katrina Stewart will not be unseen in matters relating to policing in Scotland in the future. So thank you very much. That I'm going to draw the